There has to be some concession for, like, if you want long-term peace and you want continued American investment, there has to be some basic concessions to the let me finish my sentence before you jump down my throat. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay.
75% of all violent crimes committed in Midtown Manhattan right now are illegal immigrants. Well, there was just
is Midtown Manhattan like a good representation? Wait. Is Midtown? I'm sorry. Let's do one at a time, right? We do agree though that this type of campaigning should not be done at Arlington, and that next time maybe there should be like a no camera sign, like twice as big.
Sure, but sure, I agree with that.
I wanted to talk to you for a few reasons, right? Number one, it's been a very long time since we had a one-on-one conversation. And I am not somebody who's, if I'm hosting a debate, I'm hosting the debate. I'm not participating. That's what I believe. I'm not of the Piers Morgan philosophy of debate hosts, right? And so I wanted to leave you as the last second replacement to go at it with Destiny and the rest of them. And I want to, again, give you praise for coming on last second and replacing and doing it with basically very little to no prep. And I really do appreciate that because you did help us there. And I hope you had a good time.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah.
How do you think that conversation went?
I've seen the back and forth between Sean and Destiny.
They created like 2 weeks of content, like endlessly. My goodness, they really went at it.
Yeah, I saw the back and forth, and I was just kind of like, oh, I want to stay out of it. I've been honestly I haven't been talking about electoral politics really at all the past couple of years. I've been talking about Israel almost exclusively. So
for like the last couple of years.
Yeah, last. Oh. I mean, I took a hiatus from making content for a while because I worked at PragerU, so I just didn't have time to make content. And then I quit that job, and now I'm back.
What was it like to work at Prager University? How many? Well, I just wanted to know, like, how many students, brave students, did you graduate? How many engineering degrees did you help people get?
Tons. Yeah.
We are live. And if you want, you can be honest, but you don't have to be honest. I understand how the game is. Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, I enjoyed it while I was there, but I moved on to do things that in my mind are better. So
you would say like more productive with your time?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was a producer at PragerU, so I was editing videos, but now I'm back to making my own videos, so I'm happy.
At the end of the day, like, you got to live with your own life. You got to find work that's purposeful, that's meaningful, that makes you feel fulfilled. Because at the end of the day, like, even if they're putting like viewership on you, even if they're like, you're able to have like like an image in the space, once you've gotten that image, it kind of locked in a lot of times. And when I think about like the type of stuff I'd want to be doing, for example, I took a break from Hippy Dippy because I wanted to do war journalism because I didn't want to just be locked in as the guy who hosts debates all the time and just be the debate guy. And I had other interests and stuff like that. So I don't want to, I know I've heard other things from PragerU. So my only comment will be, congratulations for making a decision for yourself and betting on yourself.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
No worries. Now,
you say you're doing war journalism over there?
Yes, I am doing war journalism over in Ukraine. I embed usually with different military units, drone teams, artillery teams, infantry. And you know what? I filmed their work. I filmed them working on the front and try to get the perspectives as raw as and uncut as possible, because I saw a lot of the commentary early in the war and people thought Ukraine was going to collapse immediately. People predicted a lot of things. A lot of those predictions didn't end up coming out true. And I thought, what's the best way to get a better reading on the situation if we can't really just rely on what the consensus was? And I thought I guess recording it and going on the ground and talking to people and figuring it out yourself. And I've been doing it now. This is going on my third year now.
It's awesome, man. It sounds like actually kind of similar paths. So after like the years that we were doing Hippy Dippy all the time, I was doing commentary and stuff like that. Then I went to work for PragerU, took my break. And now I do mostly, I talk about Israel, and I do like on the ground journalism at protests. Obviously, you're doing way more intense.
By the way, you never introed yourself. Could you intro yourself before we get into the discussion and stop flattering each other like a couple of newlyweds?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Cam Higby. I am a political commentator and journalist for Today's America. So I talk about Israel a lot. I talk about electoral politics. less than I talk about other things, but I also do journalism. So I do undercover and out of cover journalism at protests specifically. So I do stuff at protest encampments and marches and stuff like that, especially when they get violent.
Especially when they get violent. Do they get violent a lot in recent years, do you say?
Not as bad as they were in like 2020, for example, but I would say like more targeted violence. Like I've been attacked a good amount.
Like a lot of like people like going up and like snatching hats or snatching flags or snatching cameras and trying to run away, because that's the stuff I would see most of.
I got bear sprayed like 2 months ago directly in my eyes from like 10 feet away. That was tough.
That's awful.
But I mean, they'll beat me with shields and like punch me in the face and stuff.
And you know, the spray comes out of nowhere. People will just like have it, because it happened to me during, you remember the Million MAGA March?
Yeah.
The Proud Boys, like they would see a group of people, and if they're generally dressed in black, there is the Antifas, and they kind of like run at them. And they're a fight club, you know. I don't think they're like the SS and they're gonna take over the country and install like camps or anything. Mostly because I think they're too stupid. But they're certainly a fight club, and they engaged in that behavior. And I remember them just like spraying pepper spray like this towards like a crowd of random people that was like local. There were Antifa people there with shields, but there were also locals, people who just live in DC, people walking by, people who just stayed after the protest. It's always a mess at these things, and the spray is the worst because it affects everybody. It's like you can't really get away with it. I got really lucky. It got in my hair, didn't really get in my eyes. Other people were not that lucky.
Yeah, I got terrified too, because I was in LA and I was doing a lot of stuff at UCLA and kind of testing the waters with those protesters, and they were probably the most violent group that I'd been around, and they all knew who I was. Like they call me by my first name and stuff.
Did you say you were going to be there, or were you quiet about it until you went?
Sorry, what'd you say?
Were you like on social media, like I'm going to be here filming, or were you like quiet about it until you got there and then like
quiet until I got there and then a live tweet? But they all know my face. So like the thing at the synagogue where I got bear sprayed, what was scary is like all of a sudden you recognize everyone's faces, the people who at least you can see their faces, and they all hate you, and now you're blind. That's the scary thing. So like a rabbi, actually first Sean Carmichael, who is a left-wing journalist, grabbed me and helped me, and then a rabbi grabbed me and he hid me behind a car and they bailed water into my eyes.
Well, let me just say, I sympathize of getting pepper sprayed or bear sprayed. It sucks. It's awful. And it takes forever to get out. Now, let's get into the discussion. And let me just say, this doesn't have to be a debate. If we just end up agreeing on stuff, that's great. If we agree on some things, agree on other things, that's great, right? I call it a debate because that's almost always how it ends, especially if people disagree, right? But I want to talk to you about a few things in the news. The first thing, I wanted to talk to you about the Trump Arlington scandal. For those who are unaware, Trump went to Arlington National Cemetery, which is probably considered, when it comes to the military, probably one of the most hallowed grounds in the United States. I think it houses like 250 to 300,000 war dead, including dead from recent conflicts. This is, I think it goes all the way back to World War I, World War II. You have Korean War, Vietnam War. So you have vets from every single war, and they continue to add more from recent conflict as well in an area called Section 60. And so Trump went there at the invitation of a few of the Gold Star families that had died during the withdrawal of Afghanistan, and they started filming. There was what was reported as an altercation with staff. And then afterwards, this is my description of it. You don't have to agree with it. But then afterwards, the Trump campaign kind of went a little bit on the attack, calling the staffer, mentally ill and suffering from a mental health episode, was like what Stephen Chung said. And I think JD Vance went on the attack, saying like Kamala Harris was going after it. And now it's become a real scandal. And there's some more details involved, but I just wanted to make the introduction before asking, what did you think about it?
Yeah, so I looked into this a little bit. I know about the altercation. I don't know the specifics of the altercation. What I honed in on specifically was a lot of people were saying, oh, it's like disgusting that he would go there for like a campaign event or something like that. In my impression is it seems like he was invited there by the families of the people who were killed. Maybe not all 13, but at least 8 of them, I think, came out and said they invited Trump, and they specifically rebuked Kamala's comments on Twitter about Trump going there and as a political stunt or whatever. She's also running ads about that.
Do you care if I share screens quickly? So, because if we like reference clips, like we talk about the campaign stuff, I might want to show like the video and like the pictures and stuff. Okay, just letting you know. You can continue. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't see. I think that when you're on the campaign trail, I think cameras pretty much follow you everywhere. And maybe they were his cameras. I don't know. I just don't see the issue with him showing people that he was there, showing solidarity with these 13 Gold Star families, or 8, or however many.
I believe it was 8. There were 13 who died, but 8 who wanted him to be there. And I believe a few of them like collected like after the scandal broke. I don't know if the staff approached them or they approached the campaign or how it worked, but Trump ended up publishing some letters of them saying that they supported them and they wanted Trump at the event, etc.
Yeah, videos of them talking. Yeah, I don't. Was it only 8 families that were present there, or it was families?
I believe it was. There was. I don't even know if it was 8 families or. I know it was 8 families that are like were with him. I don't know if all 8 were present, but I know that 8 said they were with him. So it might have been a few were there, and then others jumped in to say we also support him being there, etc.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, my impression is I don't think it's as bad as everybody's making it out to be. Maybe the altercation with the staffer is probably the more scandalous thing, but I don't know the full extent of that. So if you have information on it, then feel free to share it.
So I'll give you my perspective a little bit, and then I'll add some details that is coloring my perspective. The first thing I'm going to say is, outside of just the electoral politics and the morality of this, I think this is a good indicator to me, like how this ended up playing out, that Trump is probably grabbing the reins more when it comes to the campaign. And it's not just this, it's other campaign events where he's like out there and he's like talking to the crowd like, my staff says I shouldn't do personal attacks. So do you guys think personal attacks are bad? And they'd say, boo, or do you like them? And they, yeah, it's like, okay, we're doing personal attacks tonight. So and he seems to be doing this more and more as the polling numbers change. And are not as positive as they were during the Republican convention, as everybody can see at this point. At best, they're tied nationally. At worst, Harris might actually be up quite a few points, including important swing states. So I think he's grabbing the reins and he's saying, screw it, personal attacks abound, because of what his campaign communication staff member said afterwards. And he's the head of their like communication staff. His job is to communicate for Trump, and they got somebody as fiery as Trump. And so I guess for me, I think this shows on one thing that he's taking the reins back and he's listening a little bit less to his advisors. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with you. What about this makes you think that he's doing that specifically?
The fact that
like the comments after, or like the
it's the comments after by his staff saying that the staffer for Arlington National Cemetery was having a mental health episode, a mental fit, I think is what Stephen Chung called it. And mind you, this is the guy who's supposed to speak on behalf of Donald Trump when he's not there, right? So by the way, if I was running the Trump campaign, I would pick somebody a little bit more mild-mannered to do that, right? I don't know if the appeal of Mike Pence has fallen off that much that anybody that's even like as stale as him, like why not just get the stalest, grayest man in the Senate to just be Trump's guy? But that's my opinion. My problem with it isn't just like I'll just get to the core of it. It's the attack ad on top of it. It's not just what they said about the staffer, which the Army has rebuked, and and of course the National Cemetery has rebuked. It's the fact that he made it into an attack ad that upsets me, especially in Section 60, which filming for campaign events is not allowed. He was told clearly not to, and they did it anyway. And to me, turning it into an attack ad at the graves of fallen soldiers, I think it makes the ground a partisan ground for conflict in a way that scares me, because the last thing I want to see happening is like people getting into like the records of each like Gold Star family and like for example, one family came out and said they didn't like this. I don't know if you heard about this, but they came out and they're like, because their family's grave, if you see it right there to the left, that's their son's gravestone. He died by suicide in 2020. He was a Silver Star veteran. He was also Bronze Star. He has other orders of merit. And he killed himself, and his family was not happy to see it used for any political capacity. They said that while they respect the rest of the family members, that Section 60 is not supposed to be a ground for campaigning, and they don't want it that way. And my fear is that how long until somebody starts posting on Twitter, we want the heroes that died in combat and didn't kill themselves. We want the heroes that, are really brave, and don't like walk out on it. And I'm not saying that everybody's like that, but we saw how Trump treated John McCain when he was a POW. We've heard other rumors, which are not confirmed, about how he's talked about veterans behind closed doors. Trump continues to deny those things, of course. And it's impossible for to say, we don't have recording. But I don't think this should be the ground for political partisanship, not only out of respect for the dead, but also because this opens up a can of worms that can get dangerous fast. Like, see how disgusting. Yeah, sure. See what happened to that firefighter at the Trump rally? How quickly that degenerated.
Oh yeah, with yeah, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. So yeah, no, I mean I agree with you, but I think I haven't. And granted, I haven't seen the ad. If you want to play it, you can. If you have it accessible.
I do have it. I have it just for this reason because most people didn't see the actual ad. Most people just saw this picture. And I don't blame it because Trump posted it on TikTok, and I don't have TikTok installed. I don't know if you have TikTok installed.
I do.
I'm not a TikTok person. You do TikTok? You did TikTok at one point, didn't you?
Yeah, I had 1.5 million, then I got banned, and now I have 600K. But that account's about to get banned.
I mean, you were being super racist and evil and disgusting and gross and misogynistic. Yep, what are some other ones I can throw at you?
I don't know, Islamophobic.
Okay, that's good. I'll throw that out there too. And you know what? Fatphobic too. I think you're fatphobic as well. But here's the video. And to me, now you might classify this differently. We might disagree with how the Afghanistan withdrawal did, but this is not the time or place in my mind. But let me play it for you.
Right, yeah, let's see it.
We lost 13 great people. What a horrible day it was. We didn't lose one person in 18 months. And then they took over that disaster, the leaving of Afghanistan.
So there's two things about this that I don't like, right? Number one, this is campaign focused, right? Nobody can deny this isn't around the campaign. So this is a campaign ad, in my view. It's posted on their social medias. They brought it. It was. I think you asked. You didn't know for sure, but. And this isn't a got you because I had to look this up too because it didn't say in a lot of the articles, but it was his camera people that they brought. So it was his staff and they filmed this and then they used it as a mechanism to attack Joe Biden's record on Afghanistan and Joe Biden as, you know, being commander in chief, because that is, of course, one of the top priorities of the president, if not the top priority of the president. So this is an attack ad. And now you can agree with like disagreement with Biden's withdrawal. I disagree with how some of that withdrawal was handled, but what I don't like is we start here and then my counter would have to be, okay, let's talk about how the Doha agreement went. Were the Afghan government on the table? Why did the government collapse so fast? Why was there no public confidence in the government, even to last like a year before the Taliban took over, like many experts expected? Now we're having a partisan political debate over the bodies of these people. And I don't think this is the place for it. And I think that's why you had federal law against it.
Well, I think, okay, so I think that I would have two disagreements there. So I think I tend to agree with you that like we probably shouldn't be using like Arlington Cemetery as a political football, but I think more so than anything, it's not about the cemetery itself. It's about, but he did film there, right? It's about the families and the people who died. And I do think that there should be political discussion happening around people who die in the military.
Absolutely.
If they're
Absolutely
viewed as like just, you know what I mean? If it seems like they shouldn't have died or there was a alternative way politically to handle that situation.
Yes, but you don't use that over the graves of people who don't even want to be involved in the campaign in an area where they were assured that their dead children would not, you know, be politicized. Because I mean, like, it's not like those gravestones are pushed in the back somewhere where a lot of these people keep it somewhat private about this. It's Section 60. It's recent combat deaths. So these or recent deaths. We're not talking about people like who died in like 1940, right? We're talking about people who recently died. And if they don't want to participate in that, I feel like on principle, definitely after the staff told them not to, this is just really disrespectful. Would you agree this is disrespectful to the armed forces in some way? Like I can understand thinking it's disrespectful to the family, but it's not just the 8 people that are buried there. It is also like 250,000 to 300,000 people.
Sure, but it seems like it's almost like filming in a public area and not getting the consent of every person.
To be clear, it is not a public area. It is Section 60.
No. I know.
Yeah.
Right, I know. But what I'm saying is like it's like filming in an area with a lot of people. It seems like, and then there are people in the background, and you obviously don't give a consent waiver to every single one of those people. They're just in the background, right? It's like you're not intentionally using those people that are behind. It's specifically focused on these 8 people or 13 people or whatever who died due to what, in my opinion, is a political stumble by the current leader of the United States. It seems like it's pretty much centered around that.
I think I would probably agree with you on some of the critiques of Biden's handling of the withdrawal. I think we maybe disagree, maybe agree on how the Doha agreement was negotiated. and Trump Trump acting against his own. My problem was always like acting against their own principles. I hate timetables. Okay, let's do a timetable. It's the same thing about Ukraine negotiation. I'm not going to work like Obama and do timetables on withdraw from Iraq, withdraw from these countries. This is a bad idea. You don't want to tell the enemy your plan. But I'm also going to negotiate peace between Russia and Ukraine before the country. I'm going to make that solid commitment so the Russians can use it as leverage. I have this consistent problem with Trump acting against foreign policy principles that I feel like represent him. Sorry, that was like an offside rant. If you wanted to respond to that, that would only be fair.
Yeah, it's been a long time since the Afghanistan. I remember I think I debated Destiny on this on Hippy Dippy, like right after it happened a long time ago. But it's been so long that it's not been in the forefront of my mind that I don't know I would be particularly useful in a conversation about that. It was my understanding, I think, that the reason that what was it? The Afghan government wasn't included in the Doha talks, right? That was the problem. Yeah.
It's one of my many problems, but that was probably one of my main ones.
Was that not because the Taliban wouldn't? They wanted to. There was some reason. I can't remember what it was. I think it had something to do with like one side wouldn't speak to the other, and Trump had to like go in and or obviously not Trump himself.
The Afghan government was pretty persistent that they wanted to participate in talks, but the Taliban wanted to only negotiate with the American government directly. And in my mind, I like how Biden is handling with it. Obviously it wouldn't be exactly the same, but with Ukraine, where you have to negotiate with the Ukrainians. You have to at least build some like playing field where the parties have to act in some way as equals. Definitely if the Russians, for example, the whole problem is that they won't respect the Ukrainians as equals and want to violate their sovereignty. And even if the Taliban was going to win in the long term, by having the ANA participate in conversations, building some trust in the government, making some deal with be like, hey, how about we have elections? And then after the elections are done and, the Taliban for the first time didn't actually like try to bomb or kill people while they were trying to vote, then we'll leave the country. Some deal that would allow us to leave stable. And then after we're gone, then they hit. And the thing is, I'm not saying Trump could have gotten that perfect deal, but somebody could certainly say that by undermining trust in the government, that was meant to hold the line, that it was going to be messy no matter what if the ANA collapsed.
Well, I don't know that I would agree that this is like undermining the Afghan government.
One last thing.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
God, wouldn't this be terrible to have this conversation at the feet of those gravestones?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Just saying. Sorry.
Anyway, like I don't think that, but I mean, I think these people dying is like what prompted. I think there would have been a lot less discussion if nobody had died in the Afghan pullout. Like the whole conversation around it is like we botched this and 13 people died. And by the way, it's not just 13 people that died. 13 of our people that I think it was 70 Afghans.
Over 100.
Terrible. It was over 100. It was a carpet of bodies. It was terrible. I saw the videos from the airport.
That was awful.
I think that there wouldn't be so much discussion if it wasn't for these people dying, and I think that that's why it's sort of centered around them. Especially their families are obviously furious. But I also don't think that negotiating with the Taliban directly is undermining the Afghan government. Obviously, the United States government under Trump, even under Trump, supports the Afghan government. We gave them tons of weapons and equipment to fight the Taliban, and we obviously wanted them to succeed. We don't like the Taliban. We spent 20 years, maybe not all the 20 years that we were there, but we spent a very great deal of time fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan. But when you come to sort of a deadlock when you have one side, the Afghan government, that is perfectly ready to enter negotiations with the Taliban, but the Taliban just refuse to enter negotiations, right? It's sort of like if you don't go to the table directly with the Taliban, then it seems like there's not really any negotiations that are going to happen in the first place if the Taliban just refuse to engage in those discussions, right? Like,
yes, then my point would be, and then I would hold Trump to his own standards. And my point would be if the Taliban are not ready to at least talk to the ANA, then they're not serious about making peace, and you would hold out until they would be serious. Because if you can't do the withdrawal properly, and it's going to be in a way that endangers U.S. personnel, that endangers civilians, then you have to wait until you can do it properly. Where if this is like Dunkirk, and the Taliban was like, oh my God, the Taliban mega tanks and mechs are marching on Kabul, then we would all give Biden credit, and we would actually probably say under those circumstances that the withdrawal would have been viewed like Dunkirk, but it wasn't done under those conditions. It was an army without an air force that could not get air dominance. And for me, I would have to call Trump to hold himself to his own standard of not dedicating yourself to strong timetables until you're ready to get the best deal possible, which in this case, if you're going to cut and run, would be to cut and run with stability.
Well, those timetables were based on specific like agreements, right? Like if the Taliban breached the agreement, obviously those timetables go out the door, right? This is like if you behave well.
Do you believe the Taliban did not or did breach the agreement?
I'm not necessarily saying that, but I think that we actually.
Do you think if they did, hypothetically, do you think if they did breach the agreement that Trump should have resumed bombing?
If they breached the agreement, should we?
Yeah, like
continue?
let's say they, like, for example, like, well, okay, sorry. This is like we're getting stuck in hypotheticals, and I only have you for so much time. We have other topics to talk about, and we're getting stuck in a thing that was very off place. But you can see there, and even if you disagree with me, do you see where I'm coming from? Do you see the idea that if the public doesn't trust in their own government, they're not going to hold up rifles to defend it? And for me, just get them to trust it. And look, I would like the Taliban to never take over, but if you're going to cut and run, you have to at least make it so that there's somebody holding them back as you withdraw. And even if you disagree with me on this, right, and we're having this discussion, I just want to bring it back to where we are. We do agree, though, that this type of campaigning should not be done at Arlington, and that next time maybe there should be like a no camera sign, like twice as big?
Sure, but sure, I agree with that. But I think again, like I think that this whole thing it's not centered around Arlington Cemetery. It's centered around these 8 families.
But it's I'm sorry, I'm gonna finish. I didn't mean to interrupt.
I think we come to an agreement here on Afghanistan. You think that if a withdrawal could not be done properly, that we should have stayed in Afghanistan?
Stayed until we could properly withdrew.
Right,
because the problem would be like. It's not like the United States was under such military pressure that we would have like been annihilated if we had stayed because of the army we were fighting. Well, there could have been U.S. combat casualties, but if you withdraw improperly and you don't have a sustainable government, and also, is that demand that crazy? Is it really like if we got like a peace mediator in Turkey or somebody else to do it? Would it be that crazy for the demand to just be you have to talk to the ANA has to be at the table? It's not even like a physical concession. But for me, it just showed very little effort on Trump to, I think, understand the allies and their position and to support them in that situation. And I think it ended up undermining them.
I don't think so. And also, I think that we're also like crossing objectives.
Oh, and here's another. Wait, I'm sorry. I just remember this. Do you agree with Trump that we should have pulled out all of the military gear that we gave over to the ANA?
No, I think we should have destroyed it. No, yeah. Okay. I think that if we could have stabilized the Afghan government and gotten them to a point where they were actually going to fight and defend against the Taliban, then we should have left it, right? But if we get into a situation where we're now cornered at like the Kabul airport, I think that we should have probably.
So Trump did support the ANA, but if he was president, he would have probably ended up destroying all the equipment that we were supposed to give to them to use to defend themselves. That was the idea.
I think it depends. Yeah, I think it depends on the situation.
So we would have to. So would we just be relying on American troops to hold back the Taliban and ISIS, and including like because the ANA would be they wouldn't have any. They would all go home, which is what they did.
No, I think
especially if we took all their guns and shit. You know, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt.
I think that if we reached a situation where we create a situation where the Afghan but present at the time government was capable of defending itself against the Taliban and they were willing to fight, right? Then I think that we should have left the equipment for them. I think that we should have pulled out like biometric databases and stuff like that. However, if we got to a situation where we were cooped in at the airport and the Taliban have seized effectively the entire country, at that point, I think that we should have scuttled pretty much all of the equipment that we left there, because now that stuff is just used by the Taliban, which is, I think it's like contingency, right? Not like we absolutely should do this, but if we have to, we should. So.
I didn't think we were going to get into this, and I don't want to like ambush you with an Afghanistan topic if it's an old thing, but I mean it's an extension of the conversation, and I guess like for me at least we could agree, even if we might not agree with on the Afghanistan stuff on everything. At least we can agree that we shouldn't be doing political videos at Arlington National Cemetery and shoving staffers. I think we found some agreement there.
Sure. Yeah. I think we also agree that we should have remained in Afghanistan until we could successfully execute a withdrawal. I've been saying that since it happened. But I think, in my opinion, I think that if we were going to do a withdrawal, and if we agree that both of them were probably rushed, if we think the main objective is to stabilize Afghanistan, then I think that Trump would have executed it more successfully than Biden, in terms of like reducing American casualties and even Afghan casualties, like the airport. I can't say that we wouldn't have gotten stuck at the airport, but it seems like we probably wouldn't have.
But to be how much bigger of a troop deployment would we have? We'd have to do a much larger troop deployment to carry out an operation if we're not going to rely on the Afghan National Army. If we've destroyed their equipment, if they're not, encouraged to fight. If they just see this as basically, the problem is, okay, let's say, right? And I know a few Afghans, so I remember having these conversations with them, right? Let's say you're an Afghan soldier and you signed up for the money, or you signed up for many of the other reasons outside of loyalty to the government of Ashraf Ghani, which was notoriously corrupt, in order to but you don't like the Taliban, so you joined up and you got money. And then you're walking home when you're hearing about these Taliban advances, and then you see your allies are currently burning the Jeep that you were supposed to be handed over once they left. That's not going to inspire. Yeah. Okay. Uh-huh.
I don't agree with doing that. Like, okay. if you can, like I said, I think that we should have stayed until we could execute a successful withdrawal with a stable government. But if we got to a situation where the Taliban had seized pretty much the entire country, I think that we should have flown planes or drones over the military bases and scuttled them, right? Just totally destroyed them. If we got into that situation, if the Afghans, the Afghan military had already like ditched their posts and left all their shit, then I think in that situation, I agree
that's what you would. I agree that's what you believe. But considering how I saw Trump behave when it came to the negotiations, I don't think he was that interested in the long-term stability in Afghanistan. And he was setting up a withdrawal that was then passed to Biden. And I'm going to be honest about what I've heard. What I hear is a lot of presidents, and I think this is probably true, they were very scared of pulling out of Afghanistan, not necessarily because it wasn't popular, because it was popular when you did the polling data. They were scared that if you pull out, there's going to be a terror threat that it emanates from, and then everybody's going to say, oh, there's been a second 9/11, there's been a second like that after we pulled out of Afghanistan, is that's president's fault. Or it would go disastrously, because it's like something like this. And Biden took that risk, and he ended up withdrawing us. And I do want to ask, do you think it was the right decision to leave? Do you give Biden any credit for withdrawing? Making that decision when others were telling him to stay? Because Trump flip-flops on a lot of these. Remember the Syria situation, going back and forth, back and forth? I actually don't know if Trump would have ended up going through with it at the end of the day because of how many times maybe he would have. I would bet probably, but I don't know if he would have for sure.
It's hard to say if it's the right call to stay or leave. Like I said, I think that we should have planned it out better, not necessarily planned it out better, but executed it.
Well, he planned it out better. I agree.
Yeah, I know. The plan
was great. It was just Biden's execution, is what you're saying.
What I think we muddle a little bit is the strategic objectives that each president was concerned with. I don't think Donald Trump probably or Joe Biden's primary goal was to leave a stable Afghanistan. I don't think either of them had that as their primary goal. I think it's a nice secondhand goal, but I think both of them were probably the most concerned with how do we get Americans and maybe even Afghan allies out safely, not how do we leave everyone here safe.
I do agree on at least the fact that was probably the primary goal, but I also think that the secondary goal is pretty integral to the first goal going well, because you can pull out at any time, but like if you destroy the foundations of a state around you and then start running away when rubble starts falling on your head, that isn't particularly surprising.
Sure, yeah. I mean, you can pull out at any time, but I think that the question is which president would have pulled out more successfully with the most American and American allies' lives preserved. And I think that Trump probably would have executed that better. And I think what's interesting, too, is it seemed like the Taliban had pretty much pissed off for 8 months after Doha agreement or after Doha talks. And then when Biden took office, they started killing people again and they started seizing parts of the country. And I don't know, maybe they saw weakness. Maybe they saw a pulling back on foreign politics and a focus on things in America. Maybe it was the pandemic. They saw that everyone around them was concerned with COVID-19, and I don't know. It could be anything. But that the whole pullout agreement was contingent, effectively, on the Taliban behaving themselves, right? And they broke that agreement. So I wouldn't even put it on Biden for not following Trump's plan necessarily, because the Taliban breached that plan. However,
he ended up following the plan. He just slightly extended the timetable, and then the Taliban said we will not extend the timetable again.
Well, no, I don't think he did. I don't think he did follow. I think the plan pretty much goes out the window when one side breaches that plan. What I think you have there is when you have a broken agreement, you have a choice to make. I can either stick to the pullout plan, or I can decide to stay longer.
Do you think Trump would have stick to the pullout plan, or if he would have?
I don't think he should have. I don't think he should have.
But do you think he would have?
I don't know. I'm also not in the business of speculating what he would have or would have not done. It's my view that he should not.
But how do you know if he would have been better if you don't know if he even would have pulled out or not, or done the strategy that you say would have been better?
Because I think that the negotiations that he held in Doha with the Taliban and things that he did with the Afghan government were more successful than the thing that Biden did. It seemed like when Biden took over, things started to crumble. Whereas under Trump, it seemed that things were more stable and less American soldiers were dying.
I mean,
less
yeah,
American
because they didn't have to do the actual pullout. And I mean, when we say less American soldiers,
they were doing the pullout.
Which soldiers are we talking about? Because like this is something also got me in the campaign ad, and we will move on to a different topic in a second because there are other things to talk about right now outside of Afghanistan. And I do want to talk about your content, Cam. I need to talk about your content.
Sure, yeah.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Where was I going at? Do you have any idea which direction I was going? I lost my train of thought.
You said which American soldiers are you talking about?
Which American soldiers are we talking about? What was that in response to?
I think I said something about like under Trump there were less casualties.
Because the thing that gets me about this campaign video is just that in 18 months in my presidency, nobody died. Now, maybe the war has really shaken up my brain a little much, but 18 months is not 4 years. And there were soldiers that died under Trump's watch. In fact, like the Mali deaths were pretty, how you could say, catastrophic. And it shined a gigantic light on our military deployments in Africa. And it got a lot of people reconsidering our military deployments in Africa. And that's not even the only, there was other instances as well. And that's not only talk about soldiers dying in military operations. There's also instances of American civilians dying in certain military operations. But for me, I just don't understand why that 18-month period is particularly like the highlight. If he was also getting if other soldiers under his watch are getting either killed or wounded. Like after the Soleimani killing, we had a bunch of soldiers injured at an airbase, which he actually played down at the time, which he might have been doing for diplomatic reasons, but I don't know if that would have been received well by the soldiers there. And then there was like the deaths in Mali. I just don't understand why, like this particularly like shows like Trump's, like why shows that Biden cannot manage commander-in-chief, or that Trump would manage it better or manage the pullout better if you don't even know how he would do it. I'm just a little confused.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, of course, it's going to be speculation just based on like previous record, but I think that with this specific,
is there like a negotiation that you would point to that'd be like this shows Trump's ability to like properly like, or so like is there anything that you would point to that would show you like a record? I could be like, okay, that shows that he knows how to manage these types of things. Because he had like this is all of his public service experience, right? He doesn't have a history in like diplomacy or trade negotiation.
Yeah, I think it would be specifically like when we're talking about this specific country. I think the 18 months thing is relevant because that's after the Doha thing, right? That's after the Doha negotiation started and an agreement was reached. After that point, there were no American casualties in Afghanistan. After a focus was put on that issue, so. Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely shows that Trump had at least somewhat of a handle on the situation in Afghanistan.
That's true, but let's also remember that when we're talking about what happened in Afghanistan with the pullout, that was not a Taliban attack. That was an ISIS-K attack. And there's no deal you can really make with ISIS-K. And this is the problem with the pullout, is we had to do one of two things. Either A, increase our military deployment in the region to a point where we'd actually have to do a surge before we would do a withdrawal, which, I mean, Trump has surged in Afghanistan before, so maybe he would do it. But Trump has also like flip-flopped on deployments in Syria before.
We kind of did that anyway, though. We redeployed like double what we already had there to the airport,
and it was not enough still.
Yeah, exactly. And in addition to that, but that was because of a mistake that Biden made. We had to redeploy more troops than were there in the first place. And I think that
what's the other option too, though? Sorry, I interrupted
No,
you.
I
I'll let you
agree.
finish
Once-
quickly. This
once
wasn't
you
my
kinda,
point.
like-
I'll get to it in a second.
I think once you kind of fuck yourself into that situation, I agree with you. There's really no other option but to redeploy more troops. But also,
Wait, what would fuck them into
ISK,
that situation?
What fucked them into that situation?
Would it be the agreement, or would it be something else?
No, I think it was pulling out in the first place and choosing to follow the
Precipitated by
agreement.
what?
Precipitated by the Taliban breaking the agreement. I think that after the Taliban broke the agreement, we shouldn't have followed the agreement, and I don't think that Trump would have either. On top of that, it was ISIS-K.
Wait, did Trump has Trump ever declared that he wouldn't have withdrawn? Like his,
No,
like
he
his, like, or that he would have withdrawn, or because everything I heard is like I would have withdrawn better, not I wouldn't have
I think-
withdrawn. They fucked us. The Taliban screwed us over.
Well, I think the goal is obviously to withdraw at some point, right? The goal is obviously to withdraw at some point, but I think the agreement specifically being contingent on the Taliban not killing people is evidence that Trump wouldn't have continued the pullout agreement if it was broken. On top of that, like you said earlier, it was
Do you
ISIS-K at
think
the
he would have
airport.
prioritized Afghan lives? Really?
Do I think that he would have prioritized Afghan lives?
Yeah, because it wasn't like the Taliban was killing American soldiers; they were killing Afghan soldiers. They were having raids and
No, I
fights
don't
with the
think-
government.
I don't think it has to be a dichotomy between Afghan and American lives. I think that if the Taliban break the agreement, that's probably justification to believe that you're putting American lives in danger if you try to withdraw, which is evidently what happened. And on top of that, like I said earlier, it was ISIS-K at the airport. However, the only reason that ISIS-K was able to carry out that terrorist attack is because we drew down our soldiers to such a degree and cornered ourselves at the airport, and the Taliban seized the entire country, including Kabul, and were emboldened by that and allowed to do it by the Taliban. It's the only way that they were able to actually execute that terrorist attack. Otherwise, they would have been unable.
Do you think that? And there's a few things I disagree with there, but we've been talking about this so much, and we said we're going to move on. That I'm gonna ask this question. Trump's original timetable was extended because they didn't have enough time to get troops there and different things there, and they needed to extend it to prepare for the withdrawal and to try to get the ANA ready in some capacity. Do you think Trump would have followed his original? Like if Trump followed the original timetable, wouldn't the situation have possibly been worse? Let's say Trump was like, we're leaving this day. Okay, we do leave this day. Isn't there the possibility, like, since we don't really have much of like a diplomatic record that we can point to show that he's successfully done these types of things before, that he could have just ended up staying on the original timetable, saying, of course it's a good timetable, it was my plan after all, and then just leaving earlier, and the situation could have been worse and it would have been even less prepared?
Well, didn't you just say that he didn't follow through with that original timetable?
No, Biden didn't because the
right.
timetable was passed to
Yeah.
Biden. Biden decided to extend the timetable, which I mean,
Sure, yeah.
obviously
I mean,
it
I don't
still
know,
wasn't
maybe-
enough.
Maybe, I don't know. And I think it's also important. I don't agree with Trump on everything. So like, if Trump would have continued the pullout after the Taliban broke the agreement, I would have just disagreed with Trump's action there. There are lots of things I don't agree with Trump on. I don't agree with his like posturing of burning American flags, that being banned, sending people to jail for that. I don't think he's actually going to do that. He's been saying he'd do it for years and he never did it as president, but I don't agree with him even saying it. I think it's a First Amendment protected expression of speech, and I think it's wrong. I don't agree with the banning of bump stocks.
Okay.
But I mean, there are lots of things that I don't agree with Trump on.
Fair enough. I have some similar things about it. Like, I don't think we should ban the AR-15. I don't think that is particularly. I don't think, number one, I don't know how you're gonna enforce that. Number two, it's one of the most popular guns in America. Number three, I like the main problem with gun violence is handgun violence, and a lot of these guns have been used in some high-profile shootings. If you're trying to do this from a legislative angle, you would be trying to make it so it's harder to get like handguns and stuff like that on the street, or you'd be trying to talk about like, you know, expanded background checks, red flag laws, and finding some compromise so you don't trample on people's Second Amendment rights. I don't think like individual weapons ban is anything else than like headline grabbing, honestly speaking. Especially like if it was like a whole class of weapon, like the assault weapons ban, at least you could be like, they're trying to stop whole class. You can get another weapon to do what the AR-15 does with other stuff that's on the market very easily. You can just get some other equivalent that's made in some other country. Like I just don't think it's effective policy.
And AR-15s account for less than 2% of homicide, and rifles in general account for less than 5%. It's insane. Handguns, if you really wanted to stop like mass casualty events,
Handguns are the big thing, yeah.
For this, but handguns, yeah, because they're concealed.
That's why in my state of Maryland, I could buy an AR-15 first time around walking in a gun store. It would take me like weeks to months for me to be able to get a revolver, like a snub nose. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense.
So I wanted to move on, and I wanted to move on to your content, Cam, because you're just such a beautiful angel, and I wanted to give the people an opportunity to see the type of amazing content that you create, Cam. Let me find, where is it? It's one of your, I think one of your TikTok, YouTube shorts. You reported on the news. Tim Walz claimed he served in war. He did not. In CNN, he says it was a grammar mistake. Not a lie.
Yep.
Let's watch this together and let's talk about beautiful Tim Walz.
Tim Walz was just confronted on CNN during his interview about his lie that he served in war.
And we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
He completely refused to answer the question. When the interviewer doubled down and asked again, he said that it was simply a grammar issue. It seems to me that it's an honesty issue. Take a look.
You said that you carried weapons in war, but you have never deployed actually in a war zone. A campaign official said that you misspoke. Did you?
Well, first of all, I'm incredibly proud. I've done 24 years of wearing the uniform of this country. Equally proud of my service in a public school classroom, whether it's Congress or the governor. My record speaks for itself, but I think people are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and I speak especially passionately about our children being shot in schools and around guns. So I think people know me. They know who I am. They know where my heart is. And again, my record has been out there for over 40 years to speak for itself.
And the idea that you said that you were in war, did you misspeak as the campaign has said?
Yeah, I said we were talking about, in this case, this was after a school shooting, the ideas of carrying these weapons of war. And my wife, the English teacher, told me my grammar is not always correct.
So, first off, upon rewatching this, do you have any immediate thoughts?
Yeah. Also, Dylan, by the way, your stream looks like it's got no pictures of us.
Oh, did it not? Did it not show that? Okay, we'll just have Danabo have to play it over for stream. Never mind then. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. You're good. Just wanted
For
to let
YouTube,
you know in
we'll
case
fix
you.
it. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no. So, what was the question? Sorry.
Do you have any immediate thoughts upon rewatching that before I give my thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think he was asked the question. I showed the clip in the video that it was referencing, right?
Yes, you did play the clip, yes.
Yeah. So I think that he was asked the question by Dana Bash, and I think that he totally floundered the first time he was asked, and he went on a tirade about how he's proud of his service as a teacher and all these other things. And then the second time he was asked, he said it was a grammar mistake. But it doesn't. It seems like a grammar mistake is going to be more so like in text, rather than when you're saying I carried these weapons in war. I mean, it seems like a small white lie, but I still think that it's important, probably.
Okay. Honestly speaking, sorry, I keep messing up the overlay. Honestly speaking, I think this is the least important thing in the world, and I think this is everything wrong with both American media, mainstream, and alternative media. Is this right here? Because what I saw, right, what I heard, and maybe you didn't hear it, right? But let me re-listen to the thing that he said, right? And let's go on an adventure. Come on an adventure with me, Cam, down Good Faith Avenue, next to Bipartisan Lane and Unity Drive, okay? And let's listen to what he said one more time.
He served in war.
And we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
To me, he's saying, when I heard this the first time, what I heard, right? Now, maybe it's because I'm a streamer and I listen to clip chipping all the time. What I heard is, these weapons of war, one more time.
Make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where
these weapons of war that I carried, period, in war is the only place that they are. That's what I
don't know, Dylan.
Now,
I don't think
let me finish my sentence, right?
Go ahead.
Now, this is bad grammar. This would be a bad way of saying it. This would be a way of stumbling and fumbling it out. But for me, hearing the way he said it, and he said it clunkily too. You'll admit that. He didn't say this there was a weird pause there. It was a weird jump. He said this clunkily, and I think it's a much easier explanation for me to say that the dude slipped up on his language rather than say that in this one specific meeting, which was not on the TV and all the other things, he just randomly suggested that he fought in a war that he never did, which he's never really done on any other occasion that I could see. So for me, it would have to be like a crazy isolated incident where he just was like, you know what, let's just suggest that I've been to Afghanistan, you know?
To me, it seems like he is suggesting that he's been to Afghanistan. This is the first time I've heard somebody break it down like that, but I don't think that I think that if you were going to say it in that way, it would be like exactly the way you said it. These weapons of war, period, that I carried. No. These weapons of war that I carried, period, in war is the only place that they'll be. but he didn't say it like that. He said, these weapons of war that I carried in war, period.
No, like, let me be clear. This is not the best grammatical way to say it. But
can we rewatch it real quick?
Okay, we'll rewatch it one more time, okay? Or as many times as you need. It's a very short clip.
In war.
And we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
I think he's trying to say that these weapons should only be in war, while also saying that he carried the weapon. Because in my mind, he's trying to cite his experience firing these weapons, and from everything I heard, he's a fantastic shot. I don't know if you've seen the type of duck he's hunted. Okay, it's hard to shoot those things, actually. I've tried. It's not easy. But so I think he's trying to claim that experience with these guns in the armed forces, and then saying these things should only be on the battlefield. And so they've never seen him do this elsewhere. To me, it just feels like an instance where it's better to give him the benefit of the doubt, or to say that he's fumbling his words, than to say he's lying about his military service, but he only did this one time. For example, you said that it's only in text that this type of stuff happens. What about?
No, I didn't say only.
Oh, no, not only, but mostly. Now, any other election, maybe in George Bush we can make a little bit fun of it, but Trump is constantly making grammar mistakes. Okay, he speaks at a lower grade level than most of our politicians. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm saying that he would be the second grade introductory class, not the 8th grade when it comes to like, I've seen Joe Biden Donald Trump has spoken like he speaks now mostly for the entire time he's been in politics, and before in politics on The Apprentice. This isn't a thing where as he's gotten old, well, there is problems with Trump getting older. He seems to be slipping more. He seems to be slowing down more. But I think he's always been somebody who doesn't have great grammar. I mean, there's been a lot of talking about this, how his way of talking, which is at a lower reading level than most politicians, actually allows him to go communicate with people who wouldn't regularly be able to listen to all the marbled, like, we're gonna just support him, get rid of him, is a lot simpler than, the immigration judges that need to be hired for my new forward plan. It's very different, but it's simpler. But like, for example, when he makes like mess ups. What was that one thing he taught? Like the Nikki Haley, Nancy Pelosi thing, when he mixed them up around January 6th. He mixed them up like 6, 7, 8 times in a row. It was really bad. It was not a good moment. Now, I would say, would it be honest for me to report on that and say Trump lied by saying Nikki to attack his opponent, Nikki Haley, I think because
obvious,
Nikki.
He's obviously not intentionally. You're talking about where he like mixed up Nancy Pelosi and Nikki Haley. He obviously isn't accusing Nancy Pelosi of this thing that he's accused Nikki Haley of 1,000 times before, right?
Okay.
He's obviously talking about Nikki Haley's obvious slip up. With this, it seems like to me, when I watched that, it seems like he was very concise with what he said, and he said what he meant. That's what it sounded like to me. Maybe you heard a weird pause and you interpret it differently. That's not how
let's do a different one then. Okay. Trump keeps saying that people are being dumped out of insane asylums throughout Central America, and that they're coming to the United States from these insane asylums. I don't know if you've seen him say this multiple times on the campaign trail, but he keeps saying it. And now you could say that he's lying, or you could say that he misunderstood. Whatever one you believe, if his main issue is immigration and he thinks the Joker is running like South American immigration like operations against the United States through all these, like Arkham Asylum is being unleashed across Texas.
I think he's talking about people leaving mental institutions and coming to the United States, or like mental health institutions, which is true. And he's also talking about like
he's talking about insane asylums. He's saying people are being dumped out of insane asylums.
He's an old person. Old people call mental health institutions insane asylums.
Oh well, I think there's a little different. There's a difference between people who who are in a mental health institution because they want to kill themselves, and people who are like a threat to everyone else because they're schizophrenic. And I'm not going to be mean to schizophrenics, because there are schizophrenics who function, but a really, really bad. I've know people who want to kill themselves, and I've met people who are schizophrenic who have really bad schizophrenia and like a violent version of it. Not all, most do not actually, but they're totally different. They're totally different policy solutions, thinking that you're going to get like the Joker in a million different forms crossing the southern border, and versus just somebody who has mental health problems. I think there is a.
I don't think that's what he's saying. I think he's saying that people are coming here that are not well, which is true.
And he keeps saying it, by the way. He said this like 10 or 12 times now.
I know. I've heard the clips. What he's getting at is that there are people coming from mental institutions who are not well.
Should we watch the clip? Would you mind if we watch the clip?
Dylan, I know exactly what you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about.
But we have an audience. Trump insane asylum.
Sure, but he's also saying like there are people coming here that are not well. There are people who are coming here who are literally on terrorist watch lists, which is true. Again, the minority, and there are people coming here who are committing violent acts. And overall, every single illegal immigrant is a net drain on the U.S. economy. Which is
wait, did you say every single illegal immigrant is a net drain on the U.S. economy?
Maybe not individually every single one, but the population as a demographic, illegal immigrants are a net drain on the U.S. economy. I can give you a house report on that.
Okay, you can give me a house report. I mean, it depends on like what you want in the economy. Like you have a labor or whatever. It doesn't really matter right now. This is not what we're discussing. We can. I don't want to fit immigration policy in here, but here's a clip for the people we're talking about. Okay, for the people in the audience. Yeah, but to be clear, he should have been corrected by somebody by now, right? Somebody should have told him like this is not a thing that's happening.
I don't think he's just flamboyant. And he just exaggerates things.
Exaggerates things.
Mental health institutions. Like he's not. It's not like he's just lying about something. He's saying something that everyone knows what he means.
It's not like he's just lying about. So Trump wouldn't do that. Trump wouldn't lie.
No. I'm not saying. I think everybody lies, especially politicians.
Some people lie more than others, though.
Sure, I think that both parties in this instance have done their fair share of lying.
I guess for me, I'm willing to give people the benefit of the doubt in a few of these situations, like with the Nikki Haley slip up and stuff like that. This one campaign stop being say this is him lying about his military service when he's asked and clarified, he says, no, I did not serve in any war. He served for 24 years in the United States military, but he's getting accused of like stolen valor. People are saying that he faked at like speeches of going to Afghanistan. People are saying like some pretty like wild things about his military service. And I'm kind of baffled right now because, Tim Walz served 24 years in the military. JD Vance served as a combat correspondent for the Marines. This is the first time in American history that we're going to have, no matter what, a veteran in the White House.
Why do you think he floundered
And this
so
is
hard?
now like becoming like it's veteran versus veteran. I don't know if you've seen like the type of stuff going back and forth right now, but it's really not good. I think it's really bad.
Seen, like people like us, people who make content and stuff, who are also veterans going at each other's necks. Yeah, I don't like it either.
It's really bad. But I guess like for me, I think you're contributing to it. At least slightly through this, because I don't saying like he misspoke or saying that like this is not true. Even saying that he this true. You're saying that he lied. You're saying that he lied about serving in the military.
It seems to me like he definitely lied. And
but if I talk about Trump saying 12 times in a row, filmed on national television, that migrants are coming out of insane asylums, like we got a million Heath Ledgers. And so, we know what he means. It's not a real lie. No, I think that he wants people to believe that you've got like a million different like people. Yeah, I think he wants people to believe exactly what I'm saying. I think he wants that.
Okay, but this is the thing. Tim Walz is saying, I served in war, and he did not. Donald Trump is saying that people are coming from from insane asylums. What he means is mental institutions, which is true. But you
would have to assume what Tim Walz meant, because if you ask Tim Walz what he meant, and he said during the CNN interview, and you played it, so I know you've seen it, is him saying that, hey, I did this because I was angry about all these students getting shot in the classroom, which is an issue that particularly motivates him, and he's talked about it for a while. I have no reason to believe that isn't the case. And as somebody who served 24 years in the armed forces and this was operating firearms, he does not believe that those types of firearms belong in the classroom, that the weapons of war belong on the battlefield. That was the point he was trying to get across. And to me, I think that's clear. So if the intention here was for him to be like, I was a hero in Afghanistan, or I served like I would expect to see it like how Trump is talking about insane asylum. I would see clips of it everywhere. It wouldn't be at like one closed meeting, and it was like a fumble that he's self-admitting to. To me, I think that we got to give, at least when it comes to something like this, people benefit of the doubt.
We can come to some kind of agreement that perhaps there's a chance he meant something else and that it was a flounder. I don't agree with that. We're just gonna have a fundamental disagreement. But this brings to more bullshittery that Tim Walz is putting out, right?
God, he
did not carry an AR-15 in war, right? These are completely different weapons he's talking about. There is no unit in the military that uses AR-15s. He's just, again, that's another lie.
Was he saying? Have you watched the full original speech that he gave?
I watched up until that point.
Up until that point, okay. So when he was talking about it, Was he referring to like the assault weapons ban in any way? Was he talking about like all was he just specifically saying we need to ban the AR-15 and that's the one thing we need to go after, or was it like we need to reinstitute the assault weapons ban? Because these are different.
I believe it was after a school shooting where an AR-15 was used, and he said these weapons of war that I carried in war should only be available in war, but they're not weapons of war. Like the
AR-15 is not something that's being used. It has been used in war, but it's a weapon in war.
The AR-15 has not been. The AR-15 has not been used in war ever.
That I don't think that's true, actually.
It is.
Well,
true.
let me finish. Okay. Well, tell me more. Tell me just one more time. No, okay. Let me just clarify. I don't think any professional armed forces is using an AR-15. But if you're going to tell me, with it being one of the most popular guns in the American gun market, that there's no way, and I've seen some crazy weapons used on the battlefield, so maybe just from my personal experience, but when you're talking about rebels or like the Hunt, for example, the rebels in Myanmar, is it impossible that I could go look at them and find with the assortment of weapons that they're not using an AR-15? For me, it is a weapon that, unlike other weapons, can do more damage than your average double-barrel shotgun or pistol to a lot of people at a short period of time. It is not a military weapon in the same way an AK-47 is, or an AK-74, or, you know, like some, I mostly deal with that, so that would be what I would focus on, because I'm not working with the American Armed Forces mostly. It is different, but it is still a very powerful weapon. I understand why they want to ban it, but I wouldn't agree with the description as weapon of war for the AR-15. I will agree with that, but since I'm agreeing with that, on good faith, that I think that's BS, then would it not be also good for you just to give me a cookie and say I was right anyway?
No, I don't think so. So,
damn.
So the AR-15 was first manufactured by Colt, and the patent was going to be sold to the U.S. military to be used in war, particularly Vietnam. It was first manufactured in 1959. And then the United States government didn't give them the contract and decided not to use it. Yeah. So Colt then sold that patent, and particularly the name attached to it, because it had gained so much notoriety, to another company which changed the patent. They changed like specific specifications of the weapon and produced it specifically for civilian use. So the original AR-15 that was initially manufactured for war, which looks more like an M16 because it was made by Colt, was never used in war. It was never sold to civilians. And then another company manufactured a gun with.
Let me just be. Maybe my brain's just broken, because in Ukraine I've seen like toy drones turned into the most deadly machines on the planet, and maybe it's just like weapon of war for me is a little blurred, because I've seen some. I mean, in Syria they were using fucking like trebuchets. They were attaching like then catapults and stuff. There was some wild stuff. Yeah. And so I'll agree on the principle though that they're not manufactured for war. Okay, so I agree, like describing them as weapons of war as at least slightly deceptive. If not deceptive, I'll agree to that. But why would he lie at this one instance and then not again? Can you answer that? Because that doesn't make any sense to me.
I don't know. I mean, I think that I think that you as a human being acknowledge that probably sometimes you exaggerate things and tell white lies in the moment and then never say them again. Especially as somebody who debates, I would assume that you've probably embellished a little bit before. And that's not against you. I think that probably pretty much everybody does it to fill gaps. But even furthermore, you being familiar with Ukraine, like I agree with you that the lines of weapons of war gets blurred a little bit. At the beginning of the war, both the Russian and the Ukrainian side were using, for example, like the M91 Mosin Nagant. That's a rifle that I hunt with, and I would never, ever want to get caught in war with that weapon.
I've seen World War II era machine guns in active frontline positions, and it is the first gun that the Russians met when assaulting positions, was guns manufactured in the Stalin era.
Well, these guns, these guns probably specifically were manufactured in the Stalin era, but this gun specifically started being manufactured in like the late 1800s, which is insane that it's still being used in active combat, and is a gun now that Americans buy for hunting purposes for like $120 a pop. That's how much I got mine for in like 2014, right? I would never want to get caught in a war zone with this gun, which I think begs the question, like when you're implying weapons of war, it's in the American context, what it seems like you're saying is that this weapon is similar to the weapons that we use in war today. The American military uses in war, which is not even close to true. We use fully automatic weapons most of the time. Sometimes we might use semi-auto depending on what the weapon is being used for, or burst.
I agree. I agree generally with. I agree generally with what you're saying. I agree generally with what you're saying. Did he specifically say that this is in reference to the AR-15, or did that just happen to be what the latest shooting was committed with?
It was heavily implied after a shooting with an
Heavily
AR-15.
implied.
He got up and said
Okay.
that these weapons of war should not be on our streets.
Is it
which I think
heavily
is-
implied because it just is the speech that he's giving after, or did he like make hints about the
I
AR-15?
think it's heavily implied because it was a speech directly after
Okay,
a shooting.
so it
that
was
used an
because he
AR-15.
spoke
His
after it.
comments on AR-15s
How could it
in
have
the
not
past,
been in
and also
favor
the
of?
Democrat Party platform, which seems to be very much against AR-15s specifically. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it might could have been. I could try to extend for good faith and say it could have been a reference to the assault weapons ban, but that would be extending my disbelief a little too much.
I don't think it's necessarily in reference to that. I think that.
Well, that's why I said it's extending my disbelief a little too much.
Firmly agree that what do you call it? AR should be banned, AR-15s. So I don't think it has to be in reference to a specific weapons ban. I think that it seems to be the general theme of the Democrat Party right now, at least in terms of the politicians.
So
that they want
to be clear, him saying in the moment, fumbling around. I mean, he didn't say it well, but he said, if you want to interpret that way, that he could have carried a weapon in war. Never saying it again. Afterwards, saying that it was a mistake, that he fumbled his words. It was a private event. It wasn't screened anywhere. I've never seen him deceptively talk about his service in that in any other outlet. That is a lie. But when you talk about Trump saying what he said about the insane asylum 12 times over, that is just embellishment. Why would you describe one as a lie and the other one as embellishment?
Yeah, because one is something completely made up, and one is a substitution of words to be more exaggerated.
Well, one was based, the point he was getting at, I think there was a valid point. The other thing was also when you say completely made up, it was well, no, some of those people had mental problems. Okay, that's a little different than they're emptying insane asylums. The way the picture he painted was that they're going to these insane asylums, they're opening up the doors, and I don't know, the Trail of Tears, they're being marched to the border. And, in some places they actually, I'm not kidding, they do send migrants to places where they won't be accepted. The Russians use migrants in a very, a weaponized way towards Belarus, not towards Belarus, towards Poland, towards Finland. So, I mean, it's not even a completely made up thing that this migrants could be used in this way if they wanted to. But to me, it is made up. You could say that, yes, some could have come from institutions where they're getting help for mental problems. But an insane asylum, what he's trying to paint a picture of is this rabulous group of insane people who's crossing the border doing horrible, violent things, when the violent rate of illegal immigrants is lower than native born citizens. That's not to say that they're, all of them deserve to come to the United States. But if this is the picture he's painting, I think it's a deceptive picture of this group of people.
It is lower than the crimes committed by the native-born Americans, but it is still disproportionate to their demographic. I mean, there are illegal immigrants in this country that are just committing insane crimes. 75% of all 75% of all violent crimes committed in Midtown Manhattan right now are illegal immigrants. There was just
is Midtown Manhattan a good representation? Wait, is Midtown? I'm sorry. Let's do one at a time, right? Is Midtown Manhattan a good representation for the United States, or do you think Midtown Manhattan is demographically and statistically representative of the whole country?
No, but I think that it's important because the majority of these people are flocking to cities.
If I was to say, for example, Republican policies don't work. If you go to West Virginia and you look at the poverty rates, you'd probably say something along the lines of, wait, why don't we talk about Texas? Why don't we talk about Florida? I just don't can we talk about why don't we talk about the population as a whole if we're going to talk about crime rates? If I was talking about white crimes or any other groups of crimes or native born citizens crimes, I wouldn't say, well, if you go to this specific city or suburb, I would probably do the whole country.
Oh, no, I wouldn't say that. I would say, well, is there a reason why this policy is adversely affecting West Virginia specifically, right? And there is a reason why these things are specifically affecting cities, and more specifically New York City, because immigrants, specifically illegal immigrants, flock to big cities, and New York City particularly because it's an icon of America. 60% of violent crimes committed in Queens were also by illegal immigrants, according to the NYPD. And furthermore, 75% in Midtown Manhattan. You just had a girl yesterday, 14 years old, stabbed while watching her brother's baseball game by an illegal immigrant from Honduras who fled.
Can I just ask you a question? Will you describe? I just want to. When we focus on these examples, and I'm fine focusing on these examples because all of these things are horrific. I just want to know that. Are we going to give the same amount of outrage to the people who were born? For example, I know that one guy who stabbed that little Muslim boy at the while they were waiting in line at the restaurant. When the wave of violence and hatred that came after October 7th, generally across the country at different demographics happened, when we're talking about these instances, and I was talking about native-born crime, and I'm talking about native-born people, what I just like start throwing out these like stabbing instances is like, do you describe other people like that? When you talk about like American citizens, do you start like doing that with, here's like the worst instance of somebody getting stabbed by a dirty American? Because that's what it feels like sometimes in the conversation. I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but a lot of times from how we describe migrant crime, even though it's a minority compared to native-born people, it seems like we're trying to paint them as dirty criminals. We're trying to paint them as, you know, well, no, I think crime is dirty. I think if you stab a little girl, you're a dirty criminal. Okay, I will say that.
Yeah, sure, yeah, dirty, yeah, sure, filthy, dirty criminal, terrible, right? But it has nothing to do with like where they came from. I'd have the same level of outrage if they came from Canada and they were illegal immigrants, right? The problem isn't.
Well, no, it's not. It's not talking about race. I'm talking about because it'd be one thing like. No. I understand that they're not supposed to be here, and in that way, the crime feels worse because you're like, why are you even in these communities you're not a part of? Like, there's an attachment to that. I understand, but when every time I see Trump describe migrants, it's always in this violent, horrific manner where these are not people that are desperate looking for a new home. These are people who are coming to get you and your family. That's the image that he paints.
There is a huge implication of organized crime. That's a fact.
There is organized crime. Yeah, I mean that's true. But I mean, like, if I was to be like, you know, there's a pedophile crisis in the Catholic Church when it came to certain priests, like people be like, yeah, you know, there's a problem there. But if I started to be like, the priests are raping the kids, the Catholics, and I started going like that, the image I'm painting, and definitely if I have a lot of followers, I think is going to have a divisive societal impact that is not helpful to solving the issues, but it's very helpful to winning campaigns.
If there's an epidemic of Catholic pastors raping children, then you should definitely address that. And I don't care.
But if it was statistically more significant for other religions to do that to kids, and I was focusing only on the Catholics
for that group, then yeah, I think it's important, right? Like there are going to be people in all groups that do things bad, but when you have a group of people who are going to be migrants on average are going to be more economically destitute. Oh, sorry, you're talking. Dylan. Okay. When they're not supposed to be here in the first place. They've come here illegally, breaching federal law. They're committing crimes at a disproportionate rate compared to American citizens. American citizens still commit crimes at a higher rate, yes, but illegal immigrants as a demographic commit them at a disproportionate rate to their population size.
You mean when you say the population size, do you mean like within the Hispanic community, or do you just mean like
no, like illegal immigrants, like the 11 or 12 or whatever it is million people that are here now? Actually, no, it's probably way higher than that now. But I mean specific to illegal immigrants. It doesn't have anything
compared
to do with
to what?
Like,
because native-born citizens.
I think overarchingly, when you use language like filthy criminals and stuff, I think that you are talking about race. And I think that when you just ask me if I'm talking about Hispanics overarchingly, I think that gives away the bag. You know what I'm saying? It's not about, for me, it's not about race at all. I don't care about the race of the person. If they're a Canadian illegal immigrant, that's white.
Well, I wasn't trying to racify with filthy. I was more.
Somebody. No, I know, but it seems like when this topic comes up, a lot of people use it to.
It is a racialized topic. It is very racialized. If you're on social media at all and see how people talk about immigration and the problem and defending of certain demographic statistics, it is to extent to a lot of people about race. I don't necessarily think it's about race for you. I don't think it's about race for necessarily everybody. But I do think that Trump, though, the way he describes undocumented immigrants is like purely for electoral purposes. I don't think this is like something that's centered on I want a good policy solution for this. I think that these like the language you use does have like real consequences. No,
but he does come up with he does propose solutions to these issues, and he does try to execute them, right? So like if he's just saying and doing all these things just to get votes, I don't care if he does it, right?
I don't think he'll. Honestly, now this is my position, and I understand that this is objectionable, but it's my position. Praise. I think that if Trump could literally open the southern border and it would give him more power, I think he'd do it. I think the thing that really blackpilled me on Trump as a political operator, there's a few things. I think Syria is an example, but I keep bringing up Syria. I don't want to keep using that. But I got to talk about James Lankford's deal. James Lankford, one of the most conservative senators in the United States from Oklahoma, oil country, cowboy oil country, if there ever is cowboy oil country. The man is gray. If you see him walking around, he is a fiscal conservative to the bone. He is a hardliner on immigration to the bone. And he sat down and negotiated with the Democratic Senate and made a deal. And that deal was not making me happy. It was not making a lot of people happy. I didn't like it because it didn't have a solution to the dreamers. A lot of other people didn't like it for a lot of individual reasons. But it would have had the votes if Trump hadn't came against it, I think. I think that we had good reason to believe that the indicators were positive, but then Trump came out against it, and the discussion of even its possibility of success was then dead. Because if Trump's against it, the people who are with Trump are against it, and therefore it's not going to pass, and the conservatives are going to get around their nominee because he's the head of the party. And what gets me about it is I understand that the immigration deal was not what the conservatives wanted in entirety, but we have a Democratic president, a Democratic Senate. If the issue is a crisis and we have to deal with it now, if you're just plugging up, if there's 10 holes in the boat and you plug up 5 of them until we get a better captain in charge, that's good. That would be good for conservatives. It would take the political victory and then institute even stronger immigration policy later. But he didn't want to when it comes to that deal, and he said this pretty openly, and this is pretty open secret, about the political consequences of giving the Democrats any type of win. And I think that personal vendetta and his political agenda is going to trounce, and his want to win is going to trounce the legislating. Because this is the thing that I'm scared of for you guys. If Kamala wins, which is possible, if Kamala wins and we win the Senate and the House, which is also a possibility, or even if just Kamala wins, you guys are not going to get offered that deal again. The deal is going to be whatever the Democrats want to make it. They're going to have all the leverage, and the deal's going to be much worse. You're not going to get James Langford deal. You're going to get nothing.
I do think that this is like a multifaceted thing, and I'd just hear me out here. There are multiple reasons why this bill didn't pass. One of them was because of stuff that was lumped in with it, like Ukraine funding, right? Which I agree with Ukraine funding, and I know that you do too. I'm perfectly happy with sending military equipment to Ukraine. I think it's a good thing, and I think we should continue doing it. Unfortunately, many people who think like me don't agree with me, and they voted against it for that reason. I think that Congress should be voting issue by issue. I think that this would cut down read time on bills. I think that it would cause votes to go through faster, and I think that Congress would be a lot more productive if that's how we did things. But instead, we shoved through like massive 900-page omnibus spending bills that get hung up in Congress and cause the government to shut down. Furthermore, I totally disagree with Trump using this as a political football, shutting it down so that he can get more votes in November. And I'm not contesting that he did that, but I do think that both sides do this. I think that Kamala is doing it right now with pretty much every issue that's on the table. I think that both sides do this, unfortunately, and I don't agree with it, but it's how politics.
Sorry, what was the first point you made again? You made your second point. I was following your second point. I forgot the first thing you said. What was the first point you made?
I said that despite the fact that I support funding to Ukraine, I think that a reason a lot of people didn't.
The Ukraine stuff. So we both support Ukraine, okay? Bipartisan Ukraine support. Yahoo, okay, that's great. We don't need to debate that. The thing that gets me, though, is I wanted it all separate from the beginning, right? From the beginning, when Mike Johnson said that, we needed to negotiate Ukraine aid and immigration together, I thought this was either a plan to kill the aid completely, because I knew how hard it was to get Democrats and Republicans to agree on immigration, and they had no success over the last, many, many years. And now we have to do it with this close of a divided Congress and Senate, and with, the possibility of Trump singing at any time. Yeah, good luck with that. Okay, I was always doomer about it. But what we were told was, if you want any more aid to Ukraine, then you have to make an immigration deal that will give us concessions on stuff that we want. And so we spend all these months doing it. It delays so much aid to Ukraine. It costs lives, in my mind. It costs lives. I know the units that talked about the artillery shortages. I think it really did cost lives and helped. I mean, I don't know if it cost battles, but there was opportunities to improve Ukraine's defense economics, do more damage to the advancing armies, and those opportunities were lost as those defenses were lost for more vulnerable villages. And so the impact was very great. But I also don't understand, legislatively, how I could give these people control of the country if they demand something or given that thing after delaying this aid to a critical juncture of U.S. policy, and then immediately they sink it anyway and then say, never mind, we don't need to do it, and then just pass it like it would have been separate. The deal they ended up passing was no different, basically, than if they would have passed it separately. It was essentially the same deal.
Well, I think the problem is what you have level-headed Republicans and you have moronic Republicans.
Can you give me some examples? I want to feel your polls here.
Marjorie Taylor Greene,
as the reasonable ones, yes.
No, yeah. Of course, you're right. As the thought leaders of our time. Yeah. But I think you have these morons in Congress who are Republicans who lead dissent on things. For what reason?
Wait, who are the reasonable Republicans, though? I want to hear the reasonable Republicans.
I would say that there's probably the unreasonables like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz, and then there's everybody else. right?
You think everybody else is agreeable, like Ron Johnson?
Not everybody else. But you know what I'm talking about. People in that camp.
I can agree,
like
Lisa Murkowski. I think Lisa Murkowski is agreeable, but she's also, kind of a political maverick. The Tea Party tried to kill her. Well, not kill her, but kill her politically.
But you know what I'm saying? You have like normal Republicans in Congress, and then you have these guys and gals who will just stir up dissent over anything that they don't agree with that doesn't fit their agenda at any given.
But if they can hijack the
reason.
negotiations, if you agree that those people are doing stuff that's negative and hurting the country and hurting foreign policy because they're hijacking like serious business with social media points, which I have a feeling that we're kind of vibing in the same areas, all for like podcasts and the Twitter moments and not for actual legislating.
They're looking for airtime.
Yeah. If we agree with that, how is giving those people like the chambers of power where they're going to have more influence to legislate and affect policy? How is that a wise decision, especially if they're the ones designing Ukraine policy?
Yeah, well, I don't think the problem is that these people, a lot of them, like Matt Gaetz, for example, who comes from Florida, a lot of them are from places where regardless of what happens, a Republican is going to be elected to Congress regardless, and Republicans voters need to choose better representatives. If you can get those people out, if you can get the morons who are just looking for their airtime and their own personal interests out of Congress, then you're going to have a lot more productivity. And a lot of times that doesn't mean losing a seat, right? If you're looking at a place like, I don't know, Georgia or Pennsylvania, or even I'm not New York, but I'm from New York, so I was thinking like Elise Stefanik, but I think she's from a red district anyway. So, but you know what I'm talking about. If you're in like a swing state, it's more risky to contest somebody in Congress you don't like who's a Republican. But when you're voting in Florida, regardless of whoever's opposing them is going to be a Republican as well, usually if they're a serious candidate. Yeah. There's very little risk to get these people out of Congress. I think Republicans voters just need to do a better job.
Yeah, I see. Lauren Boebert almost crashed. Oh my gosh. She almost lost. I don't even know how. That's the reddest of red districts. They almost flipped it blue. He would have been like that. What's his name? Doug, that one governor he ran against Roy Moore. And when all the stuff came out about Roy, he was governor for a single term because he was just too kitty diddly,
I know who you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, I forget his name, but basically that was going to be her district. It was going to be like a single-term Democrat just to embarrass herself with the party. There's one last topic I want to talk about before I let you go, because I don't want to keep you all day, but I like long conversations so people can get a vibe out of something. But by the way, can I ask you, what's a politician that you respect? Is there a politician that you respect? I want to get Rand Paul?
More particularly his father, yeah.
Got you. Man, I don't like Rand Paul very much. I think his father is at least principled, even though I disagree with him. But
I like his father more. But yeah,
fair enough. A lot of people liked Ron. Okay, let's go into the last topic, which it's gonna be JD Vance, and the reason it's about JD Vance, right? And I don't want to go into any of the wacky doodle statements he made on the podcast, okay? Because I'm sure everybody's heard what he said about women and menopause and the ovaries and whatever else, like the memory glands must be kept safe, whatever it is, okay? He says some.
I will say I haven't been keeping up too much on JD, but I'm happy to.
We don't need to talk about any of the specifics because the specifics don't matter. I just wanted to talk about two things. Number one, he hasn't connected well with voters, okay? And now people could try to disagree with me. I don't think you would, because it's just kind of, the polling goes down every week. Every week the numbers are worse. The best he can probably hope for right now is to stagnate the dropping escalator that is his polling numbers. And whether it has to be with him like having awkward interactions with people where, it's hard to run for vice president of the United States if you only have 2 years as a public servant, which is what JD Vance is doing. He has no legislative experience. He's only in the Senate for 2 years. He's going straight from the private sector to vice president of the United States. Combined, Donald Trump and him have a combined grand total of 6 years, serving in public office, which I think might be like the shortest of any presidential ticket since the Revolutionary War or something. And so I was thinking about this, and do you think JD Vance is ready to be commander-in-chief of the United States? And the reason I asked this, and we can ask this of Tim Walz too, but the reason I especially asked this is that now that Joe Biden's dropped out, Donald Trump is now the oldest nominee for president in American history at 78 years old, because Joe Biden was technically never nominated. And there's areas where he's slipping, Trump's health he's not exactly a triathlon athlete. And so there's a possibility within his 4 years he croaks. And then JD Vance is president. And that's the only job of the vice president. So if you can't do that well, then that's the problem. And so do you think, since he has an increased higher risk than other vice presidents due to Trump's age, that he was a wise, number one, he was a wise pick, and number two, that he could do the job?
Yeah, I think that he could have chosen somebody better. I think that he can definitely do the job better than Joe Biden can do the job. JD Vance is interesting. I think that some of his comments are pretty weird. However, he graduated summa cum laude at Yale. He served in the military. He's been in Congress. I think that he's young and at least somewhat sharp. I think that he's more cut out than Biden for sure. Just when you compare like his cognitive abilities. On top of that, though, I think that he could have picked somebody better. I think that he was a very underwhelming pick. When I was at the RNC, a lot of people there said like, I'd be like, what do you think about JD Vance? And they're just like, I don't think about JD Vance. Like, what do you, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, that's basically going to be my take on JD Vance.
For me, like, not only do I think he was a bad pick for like campaign reasons, which I think is obvious to everyone, which I don't think we need to really debate. He just hasn't been exactly the best campaigner. He only has 2 years in public service, and the things you listed off, like he went to Yale, he served in the armed forces. None of these things, and I'm not trying to be mean to the Yale graduates. These things can indicate that you can graduate from Yale, but the skills to graduate from Yale and to run the country are very different. Just ask Rishi Sunak how well he ran the United Kingdom and how his electoral results were as somebody who came from the highest pedigree of the social classes in education. Also, being in the armed forces does not mean that and he was like a combat correspondent, and I think compared to the average person, I can relate to that a little bit more. And while you do build up skills in that I think would be useful of you understanding the world, I don't know if necessarily all those skills translate over to him being president. And so the things you've described, him being a Yale graduate, him being in the military, the fact that he's in Congress, he's been in Congress for 2 years. Okay. So I don't know if 2 years of experience, I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene has more experience in public office than JD Vance. So let's not talk about 2 years of experience. And I would ask you, like, what exactly did he pass? What legislation did he get through? And he hasn't, because he hasn't had the opportunity to legislate. This is why JFK needed people like LBJ, grand legislators, to help them while they're in office that understand how the levers work. I guess my biggest problem with Vance is that he hasn't proven himself in politics really at all. He has all the ingredients of many politicians: Yale graduate, military. Like, I could have been reading to you the description of candidate A, B, C for any party at any time.
Fair enough. Sure, but I mean, I think you could make the same argument about Trump, right? Trump had no public service experience before he became president, and I think that he did a fairly good job while he was in office, just in terms of like policy and keeping the country afloat at the very least. I mean, I don't want to devolve the whole thing into a discussion.
That's a great standard of keeping the country afloat. I think we've found.
No. Yeah, well, I know. I only say that. I only say that because I don't want to devolve this whole thing into a conversation about was Trump's presidency good or not.
Yeah, because I would disagree about the policies, but I get what you're saying.
I think personally that Trump did a great job while he was the president of the United States. There were some things afterwards that I didn't like so much and caused me to not support him for a long time. But I think while he was the president, in terms of executive action and running the country, I think that he did a very good job, especially during the pandemic. But that has nothing to do with his like prior experience as a public servant, right? What's going to end up happening is you're going to fill your cabinet with people who have experience in different sectors, and those people are going to help you run the country. And that cabinet that helps Trump is also going to help JD Vance if he were to become president, despite his lack of public service experience, the same lack of experience that Trump had. Except JD Vance actually has more than Trump had when he entered office.
Technically, but I would also then ask you, what is that experience? What does he have to show for that experience? Because if I told you, for example, I'm a painter, you would ask me, oh, cool, where's your paintings? To see if I was good or not, right? If I said I'm a good painter, I'm one of the best painters in the world, he said, can I see your paintings? And he said, oh, I haven't painted anything yet. You'd be like, wait, what? And I would ask you, if JD Vance is if he has skills, what has he passed? What bills, what legislating has he done while in office that we could show off as like his paintings, his examples of a job well done or a job done at all?
Right. I'm not contesting that. I'm not saying that he has public service experience that you can point to that shows he's going to be do the job well. I don't think he's saying that either, and I don't think that Trump's saying that. What I'm simply contesting is that just because you don't have any public service experience doesn't mean that you're a bad president.
I agree that you could have zero public service experience and then end up doing a good job. For example, while I disagree with Zelensky on a lot of like economic policy stuff like that, he did the decisions that other Yale graduates might not have. They would have ran away from the country. And the key thing of like not running away, like even with no public experience before, that's a decision that somebody could make outside of being like a prim, proper, maybe scaredy cat politician that runs away once his country's invaded to save his skin, like Ashraf Ghani did.
I mean, what would you point to as paintings that Vance would do this? That Vance would be the guy who runs away? Like, what?
Trying to legislate in a bipartisan manner would maybe, or like pass some legislation or work on, for example, like maybe those
are things you would want to see, not things evidence that would be evidence.
It would be evidence because the thing is, right now he's a blank slate legislatively, right? When it comes to his ability to implement policy or propose good policy or really do anything politically, he's a completely blank slate. Besides,
we don't have direction then.
And so, but my problem is like, do we really like every time we elect somebody to these offices, like Trump was already a dice roll, right? Nobody said that voting for Trump was a non-risky maneuver. Somebody with no political experience who was on The Apprentice, making him president of the United States in charge of the nuclear arsenal, it came with risk. But people were upset with the status quo, so they decided to take that risk. But stacking that risk with more risk and not pairing Trump with a somewhat moderate, bipartisan political operator, but somebody who is devoutly loyal to him with no legislative experience and then could become president of the United States, how many dice rolls are we going to take just hoping that JD Vance ends up being a good legislator? Like, this is supposed to be, you know.
I don't think like, sure, the vice president is going to influence the president legislatively, but I think more than the vice president, the cabinet is going to influence the president.
Well, no, it's not just that. He very well could be president within like a month of Trump taking office.
I know. In which case, the cabinet would take over and help him as well, right? I think that's
what they said about Trump. But then Trump runs this time, and the pitch is we're not going to have those dumb cabinet members anymore. The last ones were gay, stupid, and too woke. We don't need Mad Dog Mattis. We need some other people now.
I'm forgetting your last points already. I think the problem is that the vice president is going to have significantly less influence over legislative decisions than the cabinet, first of all. You said something else that I disagreed with, but I forgot what it was. Something that I really wanted to contest, but I don't remember.
Chat, remind me, or remind him if you can.
Something Trump was a dice roll. Yeah,
Trump was a risk. Trump was a risky vote. And I remember, and I saw you not. I mean, like, do we really say that when we first voted for Trump in 2016, you know, we didn't even have a transition team ready, so we couldn't even know who was going to be picking these picks, like that he wasn't a dice roll?
Sure, no, I never said that. I was just trying to refresh my mind on what else you said.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. I thought that was it.
I don't remember. I lost it.
Okay, but I'll look at chat, see if they tell me anything.
I'm looking too. I don't see it. Whatever it was, it's gone.
Ripperoni, Cappuccini.
Yep. I saw you had a couple X tabs. Was there anything else on my Twitter that you want to talk about? I saw you had a couple Twitter tabs.
Oh, the rest of them I think are just related to the stuff we've already discussed, I think.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, it was really just this one was last week because like my God, he's like Tim Walz like's got 20 years of experience of legislating in office, right? Like he's standing against the Iraq War. That's something I could look at his principles and think, okay, you know, I think he's less likely if something was to happen to Kamala to guide us into like a reckless war, use nukes like crazy, or do something like, okay, these are things that I can look at that can give me a determination of like whether I like Tim Walz, whether I don't like Tim Walz. JD Vance 4 years ago thought Donald Trump was like heroin. He compared him to opiates.
That's what I wanted to say. Yeah, you said that JD Vance was like devoutly loyal to Trump, which I think is a huge stretch.
Now he is. I think he is absolutely devoutly loyal to Trump now.
I doubt it. I think that when you have a person whose opinions are so fluid, where at one point they're calling Trump Hitler and now they're his running mate, I think that there is still a probability that his opinion on Trump could flip at any point. You could argue that when Pence was in office,
isn't that a risk of itself? Trump, if we have somebody who we don't even know if their values are rooted.
Sure, you could make that argument, but I don't think that's the case. Like, I'm sure that you've had opinion changes a lot, right? I certainly have had tons of opinion changes.
Yeah,
just through.
But I haven't gone from thinking somebody was Hitler to thinking that they're the best president in American history within 2 years. Like, that's a pretty big change.
Sure. I'm trying to think of like something that would be analogous to this. Like,
It's very hard to go from you are like the worst person to ever live to you are the best person to ever live within a 2-year time
how
span.
about everybody thinking like just 4 months ago that Biden was perfectly cognitively stable and then completely like the entire.
Did everybody
Democrat
think that? That was not true. That everybody thought that. The polling didn't indicate that.
Not everybody, but it seemed like the majority of people in the Democrat establishment and the voters seemed like Joe Biden was perfectly cognitively competent to run the country. And then after one debate, they saw him get on the stage. It seemed like suddenly everybody flipped and, oh my God, this is a real crisis. This guy's got issues. When I've been seeing it, and I'm sure you probably have too, since before he was even elected president, it seemed like he was off his rocker. And some people have been claiming that he's been off his rocker since.
Do you think something like that is
like
disqualifying if you start to see signs like this? You're like, I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, if you think that Trump is terrible because you've heard arguments that claim he's
no,
terrible.
I meant like Biden. Do you think Biden, because of what the reports were coming out and the things we saw during the debate, that like the way he spoke, do you think that that image of his mental impairment is so bad that he shouldn't be able to run the country? It's disqualifying. Like, and when you start to see that type of slipping, you should say no. The guy can't be president.
Do I think that people? Are you asking me like? Do I think that people were?
I'm asking if that was disqualifying for Joe Biden.
And what do you mean by disqualifying?
Like,
do I think it should?
That should make it so people like you shouldn't even consider someone like that to be president. Somebody in that state should not be president of the United States. Period.
I think like subjectively, I would say that people shouldn't consider that person. I don't think it should be like illegal. Right?
Well, not illegal. I meant on a personal basis when you're considering, like, if you'd ask me, for me, if you're against aid to Ukraine, for me, it would be disqualifying because it's an issue that I think matters a lot, right? So if I was voting Democratic primary, I would say, oh, that person, Tulsi Gabbard, I'm not going to consider them Democratic primary, just endorsed Donald Trump.
You mean like when you're sorting the hat yourself? Yeah, I think that like me personally, when I see stuff like that, I think that I wouldn't want this person to be president. Yeah, for sure.
So
I know what you're gonna say. You're gonna say, well, do you think that Trump calling Nikki Haley Nancy Pelosi is disqualifying? Is that where you're gonna go?
Well, no, not Nikki Haley, Nancy Pelosi. That's just like one thing. But I mean, we can pull up the clips. But he's had other instances of slippage where he like fumbles and pauses for like weird moments, where he mixes up names. I mean, he's mixed up the names of his VP pick, and that was during the primaries.
But I don't think it's nearly as bad as Joe Biden's cognitive decline. Like he's not like remembering where he is mid conversation, where like Joe Biden absolutely like Joe Biden was.
Donald Trump has forgotten where he was speaking multiple times. I can show you those clips. You don't know that? I think it was 3 or 4 times, and I when I saw it, I made a note of it.
He's not doing the like I'm in the middle of a point, say the completely wrong thing, and then trail off and say, well, anyway.
Well,
like Joe Biden,
he doesn't trail off, but if somebody messes up the name,
I'm not contesting that Trump is declining. I agree with you that he's declining, but I think that we have.
And do you think he's going to reverse course at any point? Like he's going to start going upwards again?
I didn't say that.
Well, no, I was just asking your opinion. I'm not saying you said it. I'm asking, do you think he's going to? Because if I was going to vote for him and I was seeing what was happening, you know, I would think that it would probably be on a downward trajectory. Like I thought for Biden, it was probably not going to be in the upward trajectory.
I don't think that he's declining nearly as quickly as Joe Biden was. Joe Biden seemed to be declining before he was elected, maybe even while he was a VP, and then rapidly as his presidency progressed, like rapidly, becoming more and more noticeable by the day.
Rapidly. I don't know. I think at the end is when it started to get particularly bad when it comes to public appearances. I haven't seen anything like governing wise that would lead me to believe that Biden, like given a time and place to consider actions, he's making like decisions like give the Saudis a nuke.
Well,
like
yeah, I think it's his cabinet.
With his cabinet too. Like the dude has like all this for me, and this will be the thing. I know we said we wouldn't debate this, but you want my hot take so you can have your thumbnail if you want to make a video out this, okay? Biden could have been they could have wheeled him out and it would have been an urn and a chair, and I would have voted for him if it was him and Trump.
Could have been an urn.
It could have been an urn in the chair. It could have been him in an urn. It could have been him in a coffin. It could have literally been Hunter Biden in a Joe Biden skin suit coming out there saying, and knowing that the advisors run it. And
already got it. Crazy communist Ukraine supporter says Joe Biden in an urn.
And I guess the thing that gets me, and of course I'm exaggerating at least slightly here. The thing that gets me is that Joe Biden, in his worst moment, and this will be the last thing we talk about because I said the last thing, but I just wanted to give you a moment. Okay. He's forgotten more about foreign policy than Donald Trump knows. Joe Biden has been in the Senate for like 50, 60 years. Okay. And
Yeah, sure. Then that's just as you know what I mean.
Let me finish. And the people around him, even though I don't really like Jake Sullivan all that much, I think that he's too weak on Ukraine. I think Austin, honestly, I think he's actually a bigger problem than Jake Sullivan, even though he gets none of the blame for it. Anthony Blinken, he's not the worst of the gang, but also I'm not going to give him particular credit. But I would say if I look at all these advisors and I think about what do these people believe, I could give you a general idea of their frame view, of their worldview, how they would probably interact in a certain crisis. I can give you a general idea because I believe they fundamentally have a worldview that they've borne out. When I think about Trump and the advisors he has around him, he went from Rex Tillerson to like John Bolton, then he has like Steve Bannon, then he has Michael Flynn. Michael Flynn, even he's talking about bringing back Michael Flynn as an advisor after he called for a Myanmar-style coup in the United States. He said it was Michael Flynn speaking at a QAnon event, which he does regularly, and he called the president, and the president was like, "Yeah, we're gonna put you in the cabinet." And when I'm thinking about Donald Trump and his circle of advisors, the last time in 2016, when I was walking in Washington, D.C., and I was considering like about the bad, negative possibilities of Trump presidency, the one thing that got me is there's going to be some adults in the room, but it seems like the speech or the pitch this time is the adults are gone, the adults were woke, the adults held us back, the adults were the swamp. Now we're bringing in the real boys, and we're going to get stuff done. And I think it's going to, and that scares me because I don't know if he's either thinking about these cabinet picks himself with with a mindset towards, you know, governing people who are not just media attack dogs or people who know what they're doing, or the experts that he didn't like Mattis and the other people who said were great until they disagreed with him.
Well, Trump did keep people around that he didn't like that disagreed with him during his presidency, like Fauci.
For like a year or something. Well, Fauci was kind of a different case. It's kind of hard.
Even Dr. Birx. I mean, he kept tons of people around that he didn't like and didn't agree with him and were these experts or whatever. He kept them around, right? And he gave them leading positions in the government or let them maintain leading positions in the government. And I think that what you're saying kind of boils down to the same thing that Destiny was arguing the last time we all were, you know, together, is that Trump is just going to elect all these crazy loyalists, and it seems like, or not elect, appoint, and oust everyone else in the government. It seems like if he was going to do that, why didn't he just do it last time? Which you could argue he put some crazies in the government, but he also kept like an equal or probably way higher share of people who were not crazies and were like normal government bureaucrats.
How many of those normal bureaucrats that were normal bureaucrats are still with the Trump campaign, and they're like, this guy knows what he's doing.
The administration. Right. So just because people are involved in the campaign doesn't mean they're going to be involved in the administration. And just because they're not involved in the campaign doesn't mean they're not.
Well, I'm just saying, like, the people who were in that working relationship of he was like getting adults in the room, they don't seem to view Trump positively upon reflection.
You're not getting the adults in the room yet for the campaign. The campaign is just marketing. It has nothing to do with
during his first term in office, the people who served with him, John Bolton, Rex Tillerson, Mad Dog Mattis, including like all these different staff. I don't need to name them all, but you get the idea. A lot of them, the Mooch, Anthony Scaramucci, of course, the best pick. He should have stuck with him. He would have been very entertaining. A lot of these guys, upon reflection, are very, very either burnt by Trump, and I know that they were fired by the guy, so they have a reason to be burnt. But I would have more trust maybe if the adults in the room that were like the selling point for the skeptics last time are not the ones ringing the alarm bells now, which they are.
I think this is also an important point too. Politics are politics, and just because somebody gets burnt by a politician doesn't mean that they're never going to come crawling back to them. Especially when you're appointed bureaucrat and can't get elected to office. Look at even look at people who are elected to office and don't necessarily need Trump to get into the government. Like, for example, Ted Cruz. Look how badly Trump burnt Ted Cruz in 2016. Like, made fun of him personally, and now they are like buddy rubbing shoulders, love each other, like best of friends.
But this doesn't reflect positively on Trump, though, does it?
Sure. No, I agree with you. Yeah, it does. I don't think it does reflect positively on Trump. I think people like those raw reactions and they'll like going after people or whatever because it relates more to them like as people. I agree with you that it's a bad look for president, but what my overarching point is that just because somebody gets burnt by a politician doesn't mean they're never going to work with them again, especially if they're an appointed bureaucrat that needs an executive leader to appoint them to government, because without that person, they don't have a job.
Okay. Then you know what? We'll wrap this up. And you know what? Let me just say, I appreciate you coming on, not only for Hippy Dippy, but coming on here and having this conversation, going back and forth with me. And you came here with not too much knowledge about everything we were going to discuss. We had like a general framework, but I just wanted to be a more free form conversation. And I hope you enjoyed your time on the show. And now that you agree with everything I believe, of course, and I agree with everything you believe.
What actually is your stance still? 'Cause I don't know what your actual political belief. Are you like a sock dem, or what's your?
John Brown enthusiast.
1 second.
Has
Thank you for the
donated
$5, John Brown
Please
enthusiast.
tell me who likes Ted Cruz.
With the statement, please tell me who likes Ted Cruz. I assume his wife and children. Was who, you know, I mean, they were getting awesome vacations, you know, so I was thinking they must love him. What am I? I would say I'm something like a social democrat. Honestly, like if I don't like the point and like the directions of politics, I'm like them because obviously like I have like differences, but like Tim Walz's like domestic like legislative record is something that I think represents the direction I'd like to see some domestic governance take. For example, concentrate on it.
Are you a capitalist?
If I don't believe in abolishing capitalism, then by Twitter standards, I'm certainly a capitalist. Do I believe capitalism is perfect? No, I also don't think it's the final form of human evolution. Like, we evolved from feudalism, we evolved to this, and I think eventually we'll evolve past it. Whether or not I'm going to try to bring it about by force and beating, you know, birds to death is a totally different question. I think that, you know, I'm too risk averse to be like, oh, this little red book is pretty fire, let's get some stuff to, I'm too risk averse for that. I care too much about the stability of my country, but I am very excited about free school lunches. I'm very excited about making sure every American has health care. I'm very, very excited about being pro-union. I support things like the PRO Act and other things like that. And I am flirtatious with worker co-ops and stuff like that, and interested in other forms of business management where workers
do those under capitalism.
You can do those under capitalism, but I'm even interested in maybe a few government subsidies for worker co-ops to try some economic experimentation. Even like, at least a test. There'd be no problem with being like, here's a $500 million fund, and we're going to award them to random small businesses in the United States. Or businesses that want to do it this way, we'll award them some money and see how it goes. Give them some startup capital, because a lot of traditional loan business, a lot of businesces will not, or a lot of banks will not loan to worker co-ops. They see them as a risky investment, and so
yes, because they suck.
Not necessarily. There's studies that seem there's some studies say one thing, some studies say another thing. So I don't see the problem with
ROI is way lower. I think I'm just so against like federal funding at all in private corporations or any business at all. Yeah.
Do you think the CHIPS Act was bad?
I'm going to be honest. Like, I haven't read the CHIPS Act, so I'm not going to make a statement on it.
Can I give you a general outline of what it was? It's not hard to understand.
Let me say this first, okay. and then yeah, give me an overview.
Sorry, we keep extending the conversation, but we keep getting caught in things.
Yeah, as long as you're good, I'm good. But I think the reason prices get so high, and the reason that things suck here, is because we've effectively like nationalized and socialized a lot of our corporations, like the pharmaceutical industry particularly. They're so successful and so immune to everything because the federal government has put up red tape and prevented competition from entering the market. And then on top of that, they just feed them subsidies like grants and tax breaks and stuff like that. I'm less concerned with the tax breaks. I think that tax breaks can be good for a lot of things when it comes to businesses, especially incentivizing increased employment and benefits for workers. But I think the grants are what kills them, because think of it this way, like when Stalin was forming the USSR and coming up with sort of the economic framework, he modeled it after the postal system. And the problem with the postal system is that all of the deficits of the postal system are covered by the government, and thus they're less productive and they don't do as good of a job, right? So we're almost doing the exact same model. The federal government covers all the deficits of pharmaceutical industries or pharmaceutical companies, like 4 of them that produce all the pills, right? And those companies are protected and immune from competition because all of their deficits are covered, and there's red tape preventing new competitors from entering the market, and so they can drive their prices up as high as they want. It's just a game for them. If the government wasn't effectively socializing them, we'd have a lot cheaper. The medicine would be a lot cheaper. So like that's the biggest problem.
I really disagree with your stuff on medicine. I believe in creating a public option for healthcare as a first step policy. I was brought in by the Bernie Sanders movement because I grew up watching my mother get denied health insurance and like all the way up until she died. And for me, it was something that, and I'm not saying this to guilt you into wanting my position, okay? Whatever. I'm just saying it to describe why it matters a lot to me. And for me, I fundamentally am against living in a country where people die because they don't have access to health insurance or refuse to go get checked out because they're afraid of the bill. And that leads, I don't even think, just to negative, societal outcomes when it comes to just these families losing, people at the household and, creating like economic malaise between the classes, which I think is pretty obvious that people resent other people for this reason, for the idea that people have mega yachts while this mother can't get like cancer treatment. And I also think it's economically unproductive. I think that these are people who could have been working, and we could have dealt with these health problems much earlier if the costs were placed upon a free at the point of service program than if they had to think about whether or not they were going to get enough tips from their job as a waiter to avoid the checkup that they would do at the local like 1 hour, those local 1 hour, like 1 hour, what are they called, like checkup places? I forget what they're called, but they're like local clinics. You get the idea.
Clinic. Yeah, I'm not fully against.
Now I'm sorry, you made the points about Stalin, and I just want to say, and Stalin in the Soviet Union, Lenin in the Soviet Union. I want to throw out there, Hitler loved cowboy movies. He used to have these screenings of old like cowboy movies, and like he read it, and so do I. And so I just want to, and I'm also partner. I just want people to know that I do not like cowboy movies because Hitler liked cowboy movies, and he was like, oh, look at, they're civilizing the West. I don't think Stalin's use of the postal service necessarily, or like Stalin or Lenin or any of these Soviet leaders, use of this system, if anything, like they're trying to borrow from successful ideas. I would say that they saw a successful program and they wanted to borrow from it. For example, like the Soviets beat us into space. Now, you can say a lot of things about the Soviet Union, but you cannot say that they were scientifically deficient when it came to the space race. No. Now, I could criticize the Soviets all day, just like I can criticize Chinese economic or social policy or Russian economic social policy. But if it's a successful program, I don't think we should be so afraid of ideological, separation from who we are to adopt those successful programs, even if they don't align with our, our ideological bubble.
What I was saying with the USSR is the problem is the same, is that the US government is covering the deficits of the pharmaceutical companies, and if they weren't, and if real competition was allowed to flourish in the pharmaceutical sector, your pills would be cheaper and more affordable, and people wouldn't be afraid to go to the hospitals to get treatment, right? I think that the problem is like,
I don't know how, I don't buy it.
I'm not necessarily averse to exploring a potential public option for healthcare for super poor people, but the problem is that if you don't root out that corruption that's happening in the first place, like you're not actually fixing the problem, you're just exacerbating it, right? If those prices continue to be so high, the government now is going to pay them, when you could root out the corruption, fix the issue, and then it's cheaper for everyone, even if you do a public option. We spend more per capita on healthcare than I think any other country, right? And we get less for our people with that expenditure, and that's because we feed that industry, the four companies that produce all the pills. We cover all their deficits. We don't allow competitors into the market, and they don't have any way to set their prices other than subjectively because they have no option. There's no competition. They're undercutting them.
In the United States, we have some of the best like medical research happening in the world, and we're developing medicines at a rate other countries could only dream of in some instances because of the amount of capital that is sloshing around and the amount of money that is available to these areas. And I think that's good. I think that's great. I do think that if the government gives any money to any company that's selling these medical equipment, selling medical, medicine, pills, treatments, that if they take government money, that they should have to sell those goods at a negotiated price with the government. That's going to be much better.
They just shouldn't be taking government money in the first place. Like they'd still have the capital to make innovations in their respective industry. And the problem is with most of these massive corporations that are driving their prices way up, they're not even actually producing the stuff themselves. They contract people out to produce the stuff.
Let's say that what we did. Let's say that we stopped. Okay, let's say that we stopped subsidizing these. We stopped government intervention in this. We stopped subsidizing the programs. We didn't do public option. We got rid of Obamacare. Right? I don't know if there'd be a replacement or not. Trump's still working on it. A little late, but still working on it. Let's say we did all these things. The main problem for me is that there's an economic failure of the free markets to address with healthcare. Because if I am going to die, I cannot negotiate I either die or I accept the treatment. And whatever price is offered, I have to pay, I have to do it, or my existence is threatened. So I'm a captive market for all intents and purposes. I either accept the treatment or I die. And when you're a captive market, the type of exploitation that they're stuck into makes it so they kind of have to put up with it. If the costs are what they are, they can't just say, screw you, I'm going home, if they're a captive market. And so that is the failure of healthcare and the failure of health insurance. It has to be solved by some public solution. So I cannot take a completely like libertarian anti-interventionist approach here when there are still so many Americans dying over the issue.
Every market where competition is allowed to flourish and deficits aren't covered, the price always goes down significantly. The price always remains like just above what it costs to manufacture the thing. They want, like, if there's actual competition, the corporations want to sell you things cheaper than rather than more expensive, right? Because if you sell them cheaper, more people are going to buy them. And there is a problem with inelastic demand when it comes to healthcare, right? But solving this problem would drive the prices down anyway, and then you can explore.
Here's one way you can solve the problem. If I agree with you, competition would help. It's part of the reasons why I support a public option, because with a public option, a publicly funded healthcare initiative, which only incentive is not profit, but to benefit the public and to give services at the lowest cost possible, at the highest efficiency to the public for societal benefit, for social benefit, not for profit. So you're not going to be denying in situations where they shouldn't be denied and they still need health care. It's going to be free at the point of service. So people are going to be more willing to get that care when they need it, when they wouldn't otherwise. It would also be a competing organism against the private companies, forcing them, if they want to stay competitive with the public option, to bring their prices down and treat the people better if they don't want to get these people to go over to the public option.
Why would you do that when you could do both, right? You could explore a public option after you root out the corruption and fix the issue, and then everything's going to be cheaper for everybody. The government's going to have to negotiate for less, and things are going to be cheaper for everyone, including the government, right? It doesn't matter. Like, you're never going to get corporations to care about the betterment of the people generally. You might
so
have
you need to grab their demons by the horns, though.
No. I don't agree with that at all. I think that their incentives align with the betterment of people when they're allowed to compete in an actually free market, right?
That isn't profitable.
How is it profitable? Because when your things are cheaper, people buy more of them.
No, not when it isn't profitable. You don't understand my point.
No. What do you mean when it's not profitable?
When there are going to be people undeniably in a healthcare service where the types of costs that are going to be bared upon them highly does not outweigh is not going to get economic gain. If you cover somebody who has a pre-existing condition who is going to be covered by this private corporation, they're going to, in a lot of instances, make money only by denying care. Whereas in a government program whose main interest is not profiting, is not going to have that same incentive.
It's not true, and I agree with like keeping the law that says you're not allowed to deny healthcare to people based on like if you perceive them as poor or whatever, right? But things will be cheaper if you allow competition. You said like getting people. I'm
okay with competition.
Let me finish.
Okay,
let me finish. I'll finish. Like you said this thing about like getting the corporations to care about the betterment of people. You're never going to do that. It's never going to happen. You might have people within the companies or even people who found the companies or head the companies that care about the betterment of people, but ultimately their primary incentive is always going to be profit, always, right? But that incentive actually aligns in a free market with the betterment of people because they want to sell you things cheaper because you will buy more of them, thus giving them more money, right? That's always going to happen. They're always going to want to sell things as cheaply as physically possible so they can sell more and make more money. Their entire purpose is to serve the consumer. And when they stop serving the consumer, somebody comes in and undercuts them. Notice how all of the major corporations in the United States, regardless of what it is, whether it's aerospace or it's the pharmaceutical industry or it's this or that or whatever, weapons, for example, they're always like it's the same companies. It's been the same companies for 50 years. It's been the same goddamn companies. And why is that? It's because the government is covering their deficits and they can't go bankrupt, right? If you had a truly free market where new companies were allowed to come in and undercut them and provide things for cheaper, those companies would simply go out of business or change. They would either change and adapt and lower their prices and make better things that are more efficiently or whatever, cut costs and produce things at a cheaper price for people, or they would go out of business.
Well, this is the thing. If we had a public option, I'd feel much more comfortable letting those things fail, because if there's not a public option and you're in a private corporation that goes under, your safety net just evaporated and you need to go find a new safety net very quickly. And for people with, for example, pre-existing conditions, which is something that I I think, like, I have a lot of problems with Barack Obama. But one thing that I'm very happy with is the pre-existing conditions part of Obamacare, and it's one thing that the majority of Americans seem to be pretty happy with as well. And so
I'm not arguing against like getting rid of Medicare or Medicaid or anything like that. What I'm arguing against is like private funding in company. I'm not arguing against a public option right now. What I'm arguing against is the
what do you
billions
think about,
of dollars every single year that go
what do you
into
think
private
about
companies.
For example, and look, I agree to some extent. If we were to sit down and look at the subsidies, a lot of them I would probably end up agreeing with you are not probably necessary, and especially if these are the same corporations that are fighting viciously so that we can't even negotiate drug prices with them, which is crazy. That if we both agree with the principle of competition, negotiating drug prices seems like a very basic part of competition for the government to get the best price for people who are on Medicaid and Medicare, or for example, anyone for like necessary medical drugs like insulin, for kids who like didn't get a choice on whether they're going to be diabetic or not. And that was a really big achievement of the Biden administration, and I was really happy with that. Actually, are you happy with that? I could say I was happy with the Trump criminal justice reform plan he did. What was it? The Step Back program? What was it called?
The First Step.
There's the First Step program. There's my cookie. Okay. Do you agree with the idea that this was a good policy change, negotiating of drug prices, opening that can of worms?
Yeah, sure. In the status quo, yeah, sure. I'll give you the can of worms. There are probably a couple other things that I would agree with Biden on too, like Israel. I think it's nuanced, but I think that Biden has generally been good with Israel. I think that he kind of rides the fence a little bit for votes, but I think that generally he's done a somewhat good job of kind of standing by Israel.
Cam, the way you said that, you ended it with stand by Israel. Okay, I was going to say people had no clue. So you stand with Israel then? You're one of those rallies? Yeah, because it's kind of all over the place these days, huh?
Yeah, 100% I support Israel, yeah.
Gotcha.
And I aid to Ukraine for the same reason that I support some of the same reasons that I support aid to Israel.
Yeah, I agree that like
your stand from Israel.
Look, I agree that Netanyahu has to go, and there has to be a two-state solution, and Hamas has also been a barrier to peace by shooting hostages, obviously.
Interesting. So you're a two-stater. And
I don't think people being anything outside of a two-stater in my mind is not reasonable or on in the real world. And if you want like something that resembles peace in my mind, because I don't know how you have these two peoples live together.
I would say that I think the biggest hurdle to two-state solution was I think that if the Oslo was 10 years later, it would have been successful. I think the biggest issue was that they negotiated Oslo with Arafat and not Mahmoud Abbas. I think that it would have been way more successful if Abbas was the leader of the Palestinian Authority when Oslo was negotiated, because Arafat broke that agreement.
Maybe.
So, yeah.
Hamas is not interested in negotiating any deal that Israel would accept at the moment. And Netanyahu is not interested in any idea of a Palestinian state. I mean, the Saudi deal that was offered baffled me. I was surprised at it. A demilitarized Palestinian state, non-committal when it would be created, sometime in the future, and Arab control of rebuilding in Gaza, meaning it would be out of Israel's hands. They could just like roll up and leave, and it doesn't even have like I don't even think it had like a specific policy for like settlement, dealing with the settlement issue of like you have to expel all the settlers.
Talking about like an Area C or what? I think a new deal would have to be reached totally if they're going to give all of the West Bank to the Palestinian Authority. I think that you'd have to have
it didn't address the idea. It didn't address the issue of the West Bank settlers.
Well, did it include like, hey, we're going to give all of the West Bank back, or like? Because
I don't think it did. No, I think it was just to try to stop the immediate fight. Well, do you think that? Wait, you think Netanyahu should only accept a deal that? I mean, you don't think that's a good deal for Israel? Do you think that's a good deal for Israel?
What do I think? What's a good deal for Israel?
The idea that they can have peace if, and this was what the Saudis offered, if there's a commitment to a future Palestinian state that is demilitarized, meaning they wouldn't have a military. The Hamas would not.
Peace between Israel and Hamas?
Not peace between Israel. I mean, the problem would be Hamas would say no, Israel would say yes, and then Hamas is the barrier to peace.
Well, Hamas is totally like not understanding the power dynamics in the situation. Israel has all the fucking power, and Hamas needs to back the fuck down and realize they're not going to win. But what they're trying to do is like they're intentionally exporting propaganda to the West because their tactic isn't to win this war. They know they can't win this war militarily. So what they're trying to do is gain the sympathy of like Western liberals who will pressure their governments to sanction Israel, and so that they win the war by default. They know they're never going to win the war militarily. They're not seriously engaging in any actual meaningful ceasefire negotiations. They're intentionally dragging the war on, hoping that the West will sanction Israel.
I'm skeptical.
That's working.
I'm terribly, now maybe this is a weirder perspective. I'm terribly skeptical about how much influence American aid to Israel would actually have if we decided not to send our aid. And so
it's not about aid, like how it directly affects them right now. They're also thinking ahead of time, right? Like the next conflict they get into, how are they gonna who's gonna back them up? You know what I mean? This is a huge problem in Israel's early history.
Is Israel the problem? There's no situation where America completely breaks with Israel permanently and forever. That's just not gonna happen. The worst I could imagine happening is like short pauses on weapon shipments to Israel of a certain type. If like it was irrevocably proven, and the government like did an investigation, and now the British have just found this, so I think there's a good reason to do it. Into whether the Israelis, there's reasonable suspicion to believe that the Israelis are using American munitions for war crimes, then maybe we would stop shipments temporarily. But Ronald Reagan stopped shipments of planes to Israel after the invasion of southern Lebanon because he said it was what did he compare it to? I think he compared it to like a Holocaust, to the Israeli president. Ronald Reagan said. Now, people might not be happy with that, but the idea that America's relationship with Israel like didn't maintain after that, we continued it. So I do not see like any outcome here being America completely breaking with Israel.
I think it would absolutely. I think that this is Hamas's plan, and it would absolutely cause Israel to break from the war for sure. And the reason for that is like, just a quick question: how does Israel attack Hamas? Like, by what method do they attack Hamas?
They attack Hamas through a different. Through
like airstrikes, right?
I mean,
through air.
Well, yeah, I don't know because it depends. Because if you're talking about like the tunnels, sometimes it's like they have to go down there with soldiers. But yeah, they usually use like JDAMs, which are like guided munitions. People call them dumb bombs, but they are guided. But they don't have like complex like guided systems in the way that.
They do use dumb bombs sometimes, but they dive bomb, which is just as accurate. But anyway, that's a side point. But the thing, like the United States government has Israel under contract that they can't manufacture their own airplanes. They have to use U.S. aircraft. Yeah. So if the United States just said suddenly, and here's the other thing too, is like, what do we send like $3 billion every year, whatever? Like, okay, sure. We cut off aid, whatever. Probably a drop in the bucket, not a huge issue, right? It's 15 to 25% of their military, whatever.
And it'll probably like reverse after the war's over.
They spend like 4 times with their own money what we give them, right? So a lot of their military equipment they buy outright from U.S. defense contractors. So if the United States just said no more shipments to Israel, that is a serious portion of their weapons that they just have no access to anymore.
It's going to be hard for the long term.
It's not going to. Well, it'd be bad for the war cause, right? They'd have to immediately probably pull out of the war because the problem isn't that they wouldn't be able to get airplanes anymore. The problem is that when they're shooting munitions, they're spending those munitions, right? Like they need new munitions. You, as somebody who's like very involved in war politics, I'm sure understand this, right?
I understand they need new munitions, but it would restrain them from certainly expanding the war. But the idea of it make them so they would have to immediately end the war, I question that highly. I mean, the Israelis have been pretty open with the fact that if America was to stop, Netanyahu
has been America, entire West. Like, if you think if the entire West sanctioned Israel, like, do you know how much of
if just the United States sanctioned Israel,
UK's already sanctioning Israel.
Yeah, the UK, that's one country, but there's other defense contractors like Rheinmetall. You think Olaf Scholz's government is going to sanction Israel? No, I don't think Olaf Scholz's government is going to sanction.
What I'm saying is that it would have a significant impact.
Yeah, of course it would have a significant impact, but the idea that Israel couldn't get around the idea of America stopped supplying them with weapons, they couldn't get around it.
No, I'm not saying they couldn't. Listen, I've seen Israel in their history have pulled off the most magnificently insane military tactics I've ever seen in my entire life. They were so poor in 1948 they bought weapons from the Czechs that still had swastikas on them, and Holocaust survivors went to war with guns that had swastikas. Their planes had swastikas on them. They had no standing military effectively when the Civil War in 48 started. Right? I've seen them pull off insane like military escapades. Right?
Yeah.
Sure, it wouldn't full stop them, but it would seriously have an impact on the war, and could potentially cause secession, or secession, whatever.
What do you mean secession?
Like they would. Sorry, I'm not saying it right. I had a brain fart. Concession, not secession. It would
Well, honestly,
concession.
can I be? There has to be some concession for, like, if you want long-term peace and you want continued American investment, there has to be some basic concessions to the.
I don't agree.
Let me finish my sentence before you jump down my throat. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. There has to be the building blocks for statehood and the building blocks for some sort of representative outlet for the Palestinian people, or they will run, maybe not to Hamas, maybe you will annihilate Hamas off the face of the planet. I don't think it's going to happen, but maybe it happens, and let's say they actually do that. Then it's going to be Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Then it's going to be the next group, or a resurgent Hamas, or a new Hamas. You know, there's the IRA, then the new IRA. And in my mind, unless we build the building blocks, we put down the fundamental building blocks for the Palestinian people to have some outlet in the long term. For example, when we overtook, let's say that all of the worst things everyone says about like Palestine and like cultural values and everything is true. And I'm not saying that necessarily. There's a lot of problematic beliefs in Gaza, yes. But let's say that a lot of these comparisons people talk about, like Nazi Germany. When we took over Nazi Germany, there were some people that talked about not having a future German state. And those people were serious about it. I think it was, oh my God, one of the biggest stars in IR theory, Hans Morgenthau, I think, was against a German country after that because they said they didn't deserve a state. He didn't win because we understood that if the Germans didn't have some representative organ, that there was going to be problems down the line and we would just be dealing with German insurgencies forever or other societal problems. The society maybe was demilitarized first, but there had to be a commitment to a future German state somewhere for us to develop a social contract where no social contract can be made, and violence, in my mind, is inevitable.
I disagree. Yeah, so I don't think that you need concession directly from war. This has not been how this region of the world has operated literally ever in history. On top of this, you already have the building blocks for a Palestinian state. They're in the West Bank. The Palestinian Authority has control over areas A and B.
What do you mean this is not how this has ever functioned in the world?
Let me finish. I shut up. There was already an agreement in place for the Palestinian Authority to have control over the entirety of the West Bank and establish a sovereign Palestinian state. That agreement was breached by Arafat when he launched the Second Intifada, planned it according to his wife Suha, passed it over to Hamas and had them execute it, right? Okay, so you already had that. Like I said earlier, I think that it would have been much more successful if that agreement was made with Mahmoud Abbas and not Yasser Arafat. So you already have a governing authority in the building blocks of a Palestinian state in the West Bank. Hamas should never, ever, ever, ever be allowed to have any political power, literally ever again. Okay, they need to be annihilated. They need to be destroyed. On top of that, this concessions after war thing is never how this region of the world has ever operated. That's always resulted in more attacks if you make concessions after war. It shows you're weak, and it causes your adversaries to attack you again. Take, for example, Egypt. Egypt's a great example of this. Egypt attacked Israel in 1967. They attacked Israel, they attacked Israel in 1948, 1967, the War of Attrition. They also attacked them in the Yom Kippur War after Israel took Sinai in 1967. Their goal was, we're going to completely annihilate Israel. We're going to take Sinai back. Israel said, fuck no. If you want Sinai back, come to the table and have negotiations with us. They said, nope. Nasser and Sadat both said, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to annihilate Israel. They launched 4 or 5 different wars against Israel, lost every single one of them. And then finally, Sadat said, okay, guys, I am done trying to annihilate Israel. I just want Sinai back. All I want is Sinai back. Israel's only occupying Sinai because it's a buffer zone between Israel and Egypt, who keeps fucking attacking them. And so Israel said, okay, if you're willing to peacefully come to the table with us, we will give you Sinai back. So Sadat said, I will grovel in front of the Knesset if I have to, and he did. He showed up and he shook hands with every person that he declared war with in the past 20 years, and he reached an agreement with them. Both Begin and Sadat won Nobel Peace Prizes for this. Sadat was so afraid of his own people that he didn't attend the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony because he thought he'd get assassinated.
And he was.
And then his own people assassinated him at home. Yeah. So this is never how this region of the world has worked. It's always Israel getting invaded and then docilizing the country that's invading them. This is what happened with Iraq. It's what happened with Jordan. It's what happened with literally every other government in the region that's attacked Israel. They docilize them, they win wars against them, and then they make concessions for peace. You've seen it with the Golan Heights, with Sinai. You saw it with literally every other piece of territory that Israel's ever taken taken as a buffer zone. You saw it with the West Bank under the Oslo Accords. You also saw Israel docilize the Palestinian Authority, which is formerly the PLO, which was literally trying to take over the entire Middle East, which was fucking crazy. They tried to invade Jordan, and Israel was so hell-bent on peace that when the PLO invaded Jordan and tried to take Jordan, and then Syria tried to invade them to take Jordan, Israel pointed their tanks at Damascus and said, pull out of Jordan right now, or we will bomb you, like in Damascus. And the Syrians said, all right, man, we're going home. And then Israel reached regular relations with the king of Jordan. So like Israel has just shown over and over and over again their desire for peace, but you can't give concessions after war. You can't say, all right, guys, we just want to stop the war. Here's our concessions. Take whatever you want. We'll do whatever you want. That's not how the region of the world works. It's just going to show that you're weak, and it's going to cause them to attack you again. You got to docilize the group and then move on.
I think this show, I don't know. I feel like there's some diplomatic creativity that the Israeli people could imagine up that would be able to make concessions to a people, but not an organization about statehood. To be able to say that Hamas must be destroyed for a Palestinian state to be created. There's so many different ways that you could have viewed that Saudi proposal, where it could have been, okay, fine, we'll accept the future Palestinian state after Hamas is gone. Now the baton has been passed to the opposition. Who has now seen a different opportunity at state building. But I don't understand how do you make long-term peace in these areas with these people without giving them a state?
You negotiate in peacetime. Israel has tried to give them a state.
To be clear, Netanyahu's government, my argument is not to concede necessarily to Hamas. My argument is to concede to the future determination of the Palestinian people to rule themselves, which I feel like is an American value. And I think, like, you might say this is not how the region operates. I don't know. The South Sudanese rebelled against the Sudanese. They fought a bunch. And after a bit, everybody came to the decision that it was probably better if these people lived separate. Well, against Sudanese, of course, rejection of that. And the states are created for millions of different reasons, for millions of different, like, cultural and different factors. And the Palestinian people obviously want their own country. And I think that they should get it. And I don't understand why you couldn't make a declaration to, okay, fine, destroy Hamas, but there should be a future Palestinian state, because that's
they're not gonna make promises to a terrorist organization, right?
Which terrorist organization? He did not a promise to any terrorist organization. Which terrorist organization did I say they need to make a promise to?
Hold up, because obviously the war is not against the Palestinian people; it's against Hamas.
Yes.
You're not going to make concessions for a Palestinian state against your adversary.
You do this all the time. You do this. Wait, well, no. Let me tell you. Give a great example. When we invaded Iraq, we didn't have a period where we were like, "Will Iraq exist after this? I don't know. Maybe it will. Maybe it won't. Maybe it'll become the 51st state.
Not a state,
and we're gonna call it Maryland too. I don't know.
A current state. We're talking about creating a new one, right? The difference is Iraq was a state. We're not talking about will we destroy this state and leave, or will we let this state still exist? We're talking about how are we going to create a new fucking state? It's a totally different thing. And
yeah, and that's the thing is, there's no description of how to do it, just that it should happen.
I'll respond. You said like, you know, Netanyahu's government has never shown that they want to establish a Palestinian state. Netanyahu's government hasn't really been given the opportunity, right? There hasn't been a peacetime under Netanyahu's government. We're still riding the coattails of the second Intifada and Hamas shooting rockets into Israel every fucking day and launching terrorist attacks over the border.
Has Netanyahu ever believed that?
Netanyahu does believe. Netanyahu obviously
believes in a second. He believes in a two-state solution.
Dylan, stop asking me more questions. Let me just respond here. So on top of that, Netanyahu belongs to the Likud party, which was the first party in Israel's government in Israel's government ever to make concessions for peace ever. Begin did it with Egypt, giving Sinai back. I described that earlier. On top of that, I think that Netanyahu is handling this war exactly how every other Israeli prime minister would have ever handled it. Whether we're talking about Ben-Gurion, Golda Meir, whether we're talking about Begin, I don't think it matters. I think there could be some contention with Netanyahu on domestic policy, which I'm not going to be as familiar with or care because I'm not Israeli. But in terms of like the war effort, I think that Netanyahu is handling this exactly how every other government would have handled it. If the circumstances were exactly the same. I think Golda Meir would have done the same stuff. I think Ben-Gurion would have done the same stuff. I think Begin would have done the same stuff. I think it doesn't matter. I think that every Israeli government, when war is inflicted upon them, they fight that war until the end, and then they negotiate for peace afterwards. That's how it's always worked, and showing otherwise always has resulted in more wars.
Netanyahu, it's not just Netanyahu never had an opportunity for peace. Because the thing is, there is true that there are people on both sides due to like political suppression or any number of things. Either they don't either do well in elections, that want to make peace. But if any of those people even get near power, it has to be that both people exist in the right place at the right time on both sides of the leadership spectrum. Neither of them get killed, and they're able to make peace and create a Palestinian state. This is like the hit you need to get. So you need to get people on both sides that are amicable and have no other power in the region, like for example Hezbollah, or for example certain heavily religious lobby groups, or etc., interfere with the process. It's extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult.
Yeah, no, it is extremely difficult.
And so for me, it feels like when you're trying to do something like that, just imagining like that will just manifest out of thin air, I think it's just not viable. There has to be, you have to work actively to get the political operators in the position that can make those deals and to create conditions for it. And number one, that would mean Netanyahu going, because he's never and will never be in favor of a Palestinian state under, I think, really any condition. Especially if he continues to ally with the far-right parties that he allies with, and his power is dependent upon them. He never expressed interest in a Palestinian state before his time as prime minister, and during his time as the longest-serving prime minister, he has said again and again and again, he is disinterested. And when given the chance of basically the whole region, like by the Saudis saying, like, screw Hamas, just declare there will be a Palestinian state, doesn't even need to be with Hamas, they don't take the opportunity, even though it would have been a PR victory, because Hamas would have said no, because that would mean, Hamas's destruction, and he wouldn't do it because he does not want a Palestinian state, period. Yeah, and so that means, let me tell you, you get a Palestinian leader. Let's say we get someone better than Mohammed Abbas. Let's say somebody's not corrupt and he's not like crazy in the head, like fundamentalist. And he's like, he's well educated working man who genuinely wants peace for his people. He gets there, Netanyahu's prime minister, and this guy's willing to make concessions on like everything, maybe even settlement issues, but there has to be a Palestinian state. You can have flyover priorities for your planes. We will be demilitarized. We would just have a slightly militarized police force, so nothing that could really invade you or do it. But it has to be a Palestinian state. I don't think Netanyahu would say yes. And so for me, he is one of the barriers to peace. Because the Saudis offered that, and he said no. The Saudis offered it and said no.
Every of course he doesn't want to establish one right now during wartime.
You don't need to establish it during wartime. He says they said it was nondescript.
He's not going to make concessions during war either.
Concessions to who? The Palestinian people, not Hamas.
Right, but Hamas. How is Hamas going to take that? While Hamas still exists and Hamas is still in power in the Gaza Strip, how are they going to take that? Wow, we broke into Israel and killed 1,400 people or 1,200 people or whatever it was, and now they're making a concession for a Palestinian state in Gaza that's independent of the Palestinian Authority, which we fucking hate, and throw off of rooftops in the Gaza Strip. Now we can have our own thing down here, and now there'll be two proto-Palestinian states that are both still like waging war against Israel. Why? Of course he doesn't want to do this. There's no serious partner for peace.
Wait, what do you mean? Why? Then if there's no serious partner to peace, show it. Show that, like, okay, I'm willing to accept a future Palestinian state if it's demilitarized. If they don't want peace, number one, they won't demilitarize, and number one, Hamas is included here. So Palestinian Islamic Jihad wouldn't accept it because they're not going to demilitarize. A lot of the PFLP is not going to accept it because they don't want to demilitarize, I would assume. I don't think Hamas is going to accept it because they don't want to demilitarize, and Israel will probably say they have to be destroyed anyway because of October 7th. And so I don't see why you couldn't just say, yeah, a nondescript future peace settlement for Palestinian state. We'll agree to that in theory. There's no time schedule. There's zero time schedule.
Have you ever been asked that question? Particularly, can you point to me a situation where Netanyahu has been asked in theory in the future?
No, he was given the Saudi offer. He was
to kill you.
He was given the offer and he said no. That's what he was given the Saudi offer.
That is not what the offer said, and you know
that.
Well,
they didn't have all those addendums, but it had those addendums. It had those addendums all because it said if it's no time schedule.
Are not what you're describing.
If they're saying there's no time schedule, then they could wait.
Every Israeli prime minister since the establishment of Israel has been in favor of under the right conditions, two-state solution. Every single one of them. I could not think of a single Israeli prime minister.
Why would he not say yes if there is a Palestinian state that is willing to demilitarize itself?
When you have two authorities, two governing authorities.
Let me ask you.
Regions that both Dylan, let me finish. When you have two different regions, right, governed by two different groups of people, and both of those groups of people seem to want to get rid of Israel or seem to want to engage in terrorist attacks against Israel. Mahmoud Abbas, while I think that he would have been more agreeable than Yasser Arafat, was Yasser Arafat's right-hand man during the Second Intifada, right? Thus how he rose to power.
when you have these two groups that have continuously, currently, and throughout history showed that they want to do nothing but kill you and get rid of you so they can establish a state from the river to the sea and get rid of all of your people, are you going to like seriously contend with the idea of letting those people establish a state? No, I don't think so. I wouldn't let them. I wouldn't be in favor of that.
So
I wouldn't support it. I wouldn't even consider it.
But it didn't say you will make deal with Muhammad Abbas. You will make deal with Sinwar. You will make deal. It said a future Palestinian state that is demilitarized. None of the groups that we're discussing right now would accept demilitarization. So then why can't he say, why would it be, if it's true that he's fine with a future Palestinian state under the right conditions, then he could say, yes, okay, I'll accept that there could be a future Palestinian state under the right conditions. I will accept it then. Because
where was he said specifically under the correct ambiguous decisions that were conditions that we're not specifically going to mention in this specific conversation? Under any circumstance would you ever support a Palestinian state?
It's crazily enough, he said that exact conversation afterwards and then shouted out your channel. He said that exact combination of words and then shouted you out.
He actually told me that exact thing. We all have a secret Jew and Jew supporter meeting rally. Everyone's there. Ben Shapiro's there. Bibi comes and he gives us blank checks for our service to the nation of Israel. And AIPAC's also there. So,
well, I think we disagree pretty strongly about this. I think Bibi is going to be a barrier to peace until he's not in office. I really do not think he would, under the best conditions, negotiate for a Palestinian state, in part because I don't think he has the political leverage to, even if he wanted to. Do you think that, even if you believe that Bibi wants peace, with a future Palestinian state developed and actually created living next to them, if that's what you believe about Bibi, do you believe that about his allies? Do you believe that about the people who that if the moment came, that they would have some legitimate political leverage over Netanyahu in that moment?
Sorry, what do you mean? You think they would? You're asking me if I think
I think that absolutely that people in the far right coalition would do everything they would to stop development of any Palestinian state.
It'd be a joint decision between the prime minister and the Knesset, not like his advisors, right? So I know what you're talking about.
The problem is he's only supported by this coalition. There's no other party that will support him. So his survival in politics is dependent on the far right that will never accept a Palestinian state. Which reinforces my idea that he has to go for there to be any peace.
We have precedent for this. The Likud party was the first party to ever negotiate for peace in Israel between one of its neighbors. Other than like, you could argue Mapai like did specific actions, like Golda Meir snuck into Jordan, like had a meeting with the king, right? But like the first actual like brokered deal between Israel and another country that wasn't an armistice was the Likud party. So I'm just going to disagree.
When you say the Likud party, was it Netanyahu?
No, sure.
No, it wasn't Netanyahu. That's the first thing. Well, number one, it's not Netanyahu, and number two, not only is it not Netanyahu, but it's also not Palestine. Which there was some disagreement about the Sinai and whether that belongs to Israel. There's not much disagreement about like we need to take Damascus. You know, there's not making peace agreements with other people. Like this is a different issue. So I don't necessarily know if Likud making peace with other parties necessarily affects their policy towards Palestine.
You could even in more recent history with like the Oslo Accords that got botched. Like Israel has repeatedly attempted to make concessions to Palestinian leaders.
Well, I'm not talking about all of Israel. I'm not saying that no Israeli can negotiate. I'm talking about Netanyahu.
Yeah, I think that under the right conditions, Netanyahu would, and I think that the Knesset would support him.
So you're like
it's going to be a joint decision between Netanyahu and the Knesset.
Are you a Netanyahu dead ender?
No, I don't really have like
Netanyahu
a strong.
I saw that post you made the other day. Well, one second. One second. Let me bring it up here. Let me be
probably my social media guy.
Let me be a little. Your social media guy. Do you have a guy that makes posts for you?
Yep, I do.
Really?
Wow. What he said, yeah.
Let's see what he said. Where was it?
Specifically, my Twitter guy.
Yeah. One second. Let me bring it up. I thought it was. I kind of laughed at it. Here it is.
My Dan above.
Yeah. The world owes him an apology.
Yep. Yeah, man. The world does owe him an apology. I stand by that.
Wow. Okay. Well, I do not agree that they owe him an apology. My goodness.
Yeah, you should definitely do a hippy dippy on Israel for sure. I would be lining up for that shit.
Oh my goodness. You said my audience wanted me to ask a question, and I haven't taken any questions. And I know I said we were going to cut it. You can cut it now, but did you want to answer any questions?
Sure, I'll answer some questions.
Okay. The first question had to do with the debate you had with Destiny, everybody, and I don't want to do any of the drama stuff. I'll just stick to the substance, okay? Because the drama stuff doesn't interest me at all. In that debate, it was mostly around like the discussion and like the nuance of the language. On the prompt of the idea of Trump being like a threat to institutions that are important for the country, and not on the idea that if Trump wins, democracy necessarily will die. Because like, if I said somebody had a 50% chance of killing democracy, I would say that was dangerous, even if it wasn't guaranteed, right? Do you think that there's any risk, any significant risk? Or do you think the guardrails are so strong, or Trump's tendencies so misrepresented that it's not really a risk?
Sure. Yeah, I'll answer this question. Then I thought about this so much, like the specific premise of this debate, and I want to clear the air a little bit after I answer.
Okay.
So yeah, like I think there's risk with pretty much everybody who becomes president being a threat to democracy, but I think that our institutions in this great American country are very strong, and I think that they can withstand even somebody with the temperament of Donald Trump. Right? I support Trump in this election, but I think that even if he was the radical, crazy dictator who wants to overthrow democracy and repeal the Constitution like everybody claims and be a dictator on day one, I think that our institutions would hold because I believe in them. On top of that,
Did you still vote for him under that circumstance, though?
Yeah, I'll still vote for him. So I thought about this after the debate a lot. I was thinking about it in the shower. It's like a shower thought. I was going over it in my head. So there was a lot of discussion about this being on the ballot thing, and does this mean like the burden of proof being that they have to prove that he's going to like destroy democracy, right? So what I came to the conclusion of, I don't know what state you live in, Dylan, but like I lived in California the past 2 years, and we have like somewhat like some aspects of like direct democracy, and where this on the ballot thing comes from is like direct democracy voting when there's an issue actually on the ballot. So when there's an issue on the ballot, let's say, I'm trying to think of an example, like something like casino funding, right? There's a dichotomy.
The only state that matters, the great state of Maryland, the best state in the union, the old line state that saved the republic, okay? I don't know what state you're from, but I'm a pan-Maryland nationalist, okay?
You're gonna vote either to give the casino the funding, or you're going to vote to not give them the funding. It's a direct dichotomy. At the end of the election, the casino will either have the funding or it will not have the funding. So when something is on the ballot, it seems like a direct reference to when issues are actually physically on the ballot. This is an issue, and we're saying that it's on the ballot, which to me implies a direct dichotomy that it will either happen or won't happen. Just like if I say, like if there's an issue on the ballot, let's say it's cut all the daisies off the ground, like we mow all the daisies, polish daisies, we keep them.
I heard
the daisies are going to exist or not.
I get your point. I heard this, and I thought the argument was compelling, but then I hit me. Would you say that abortion is on the ballot in 2024, that this is an issue that's going to be affected? Like, do you think people would say, if you were in conversation, you think abortion's on the ballot this year, a woman's right to choose, or, you know, what you believe of contraceptive?
I think it's a really dumb thing to say for a couple reasons. I would not say that it's on the ballot. Definitely not.
Except for the places where it is physically on the ballot, like in Florida, Montana.
Unless it was like physically on the ballot, or if you have had one candidate who is absolutely going to ban it and one candidate who is absolutely going to legalize it. But that's not what you have. You have a candidate who is not going to make federal legislation regarding abortion, and he's already said that he's not going to do that. He has no interest in doing that. He thinks it's a state issue. And one person who wants to legalize it federally. But there's another issue in there, is that it's literally not constitutional for either candidate to make it legal or illegal. It is a state's issue. 10th Amendment of the Constitution, the government does not have the authority to make laws about things that are not in the Constitution. So it would be illegal and unconstitutional for both parties to do that. Now the waters do get kind of muddled sometimes, and the government does make laws about things they're not supposed to sometimes, like marijuana.
I mean, a few years ago it was constitutional. Then Roe versus Wade was overturned by a single vote.
It wasn't constitutional. It was completely unconstitutional. It was judicial activism that happened in 1973. They created an entire framework. The Supreme Court is only supposed to make decisions regarding the Constitution. They made an entire framework.
Okay, wait. This is not okay. Can we not get into? I don't. But this was not debating abortion. We were going to debate.
No.
Because if you want to, because I don't want to drag us into another debate. We got questions.
I don't either. Just quick point. Like it's not constitutional. Neither party can do it. And it does get muddled sometimes where the federal government makes laws about things they're not supposed to, like marijuana, for example. But we're in a situation where this is an issue that is going to get thrown around, and we do have a conservative Supreme Court. So really, if Kamala was to make a law legalizing it, it's just going to get struck down by the Supreme Court anyway. So yeah, I think that it's not on the ballot at all.
I mean, I feel like
I think neither party would be successful in either aspiration.
I feel like I think it is on the ballot in a way that if Democrats win, they could reinstitute Roe v. Wade on the federal level. And some people say that there isn't a legislative pathway for it. I think there is. And I think people do not realize how much Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema leaving and being replaced possibly by 2 Senate picks elsewhere. And, you know, it all depends on how the election goes. But if we have 50 Senate seats, everybody else in the Democratic Party seemed open to a filibuster exemption for reintroducing Roe v. Wade on the federal level. There seems to be some. Well, let me. There seems to be some shame in the Democratic. I want to explain the perspective, okay? There seems to be some shame in the Democratic Party about when they had the Democratic majority, they did not institute protection for Roe versus Wade because they didn't think it was a priority considering the time, and the majority was a lot thinner than people think, and there was people who were sick. And the point is, it wasn't a great majority, and they concentrated on other stuff. But they see that as a massive failure that has to be undone. And so if the Democrats are offering to do this, and that is what I think they're offering as their pathway, and I've heard this multiple times, then for the Democrats, they could argue easily by your own standards that yes, abortion is 100% on the ballot.
No, I think that it would just get struck down immediately by the Supreme Court if they legislated it. I think like no contest, just immediately go to the Supreme Court.
Why would it be? I mean, they've done this before. Why wouldn't that be unconstitutional?
Because like you could easily make a 10th Amendment case, or you could just easily like make the same case that they made, similar case that they made in the Dobbs case. Like it would just immediately go to the Supreme Court and get struck down. You could even argue that there might be some judicial activism on the conservative side, which I would disagree with. But it seems to me that it would just immediately get struck down, no contest. So yeah, I mean, I'm not going to see like a compelling argument here. That first hurdle is you're going to have to legislate it and get everybody behind it, and you're going to have like a majority in Congress, both in the Senate and in the House.
Okay, and but that's what the Democrats are offering. So that would be what they're saying on the ballot.
Yeah. It seems like you're going to have a lot of hurdles, and then you're going to do it.
You have to win. I agree.
Immediately get struck down. Like you're going to waste a ton
I
of time
don't
in
necessarily
Congress.
agree that it's going to immediately get struck down. Does all the lawyers agree? Is this like a universal consensus? Everyone, it's going to be struck down. There's no way it could be, because it seems that Roe versus Wade, it went one way and then it went another way. And depending on who's Supreme Court justice and what happens in the next, who knows how much time, and who's president. Like, because if we go 2 years into Kamala's term and then the Supreme Court justice dies, she makes a pick, and then she chooses that strategic moment to try to reintroduce something. Now that the vote's a little different, I don't think you could say that that's an impossible pathway.
I think, well, I mean, then I would say,
especially if they try to do any Supreme Court reform about term limits, something like that.
If it's even a stretch, then I would say it's not on the ballot. I would say that you might get this and you might not get this, just like with every other issue that presidential candidates throw around.
If it's a stretch, it's not on the ballot.
They could pack the court, but that would just be like super corrupt in my opinion.
You can't. I mean, I just don't.
No, I'm not saying you said that. I'm not saying you said that.
I mean, this sounds like you. I hate to say this. This feels like you sound. Oh, you're not gonna like this comparison. I don't mean to be mean, but you sound like Jimmy Dore. I don't know if you remember. You don't know who Jimmy Dore is? Oh, wow. I'm very happy to hear that you've made my day. But I remember there was this moment where he had a debate with somebody called Sam Cedar. I don't know if you know who that is. And it had to do. Hello, Doghouse. Thank you for the raid. And thank you for the people who are subbing. I just haven't shouted out because I'm enthralled by conversation. He said that he didn't want to vote for Hillary. He was a very progressive guy, and he didn't want to vote for Hillary Clinton. And when Sam Cedar said, well, what about, Roe versus Wade getting overturned? Supreme Court justice picks could be just around the corner. He said the idea of Trump instituting 3 Supreme Court justice picks was less likely than the moon falling into Lake Michigan. And then that's what Trump exactly got. And he got 3 Supreme Court justice picks. I'm just talking about 1 Supreme Court justice pick, maybe 2. And so that with a filibuster, there's a legislative pathway, and then there could be a legal pathway, because we just had Roe versus Wade, and not everybody agreed with the majority decision. It was a close decision. And so depending on how the Supreme Court changes, and the Democrats are making this offer, I mean, how do you say that this is what you're running on? Here's a legislative pathway, and there's definitely the possibility that the Supreme Court justice dies. or you know, any.
It could be possible, but I don't think that means it's on the ballot.
How does that not mean it's on the ballot? If I said I want to do this and it's possible, and you said, well, it's not likely enough.
Yeah, because like when I hear something's on the ballot, that means there's a dichotomy. It's either going to happen or it's not going to happen, right? Just like when I vote on an issue that's physically on the ballot.
But then
in
nothing would
California,
be on the ballot then,
on the
right?
ballot, I'm voting yes or no. Yes, exactly. That's why I think saying that things are on the ballot is like so fucking stupid. I'm gonna refrain from my language here, but I think that it's the dumbest thing you can do in terms of like legislative promises, especially as a presidential candidate who doesn't even fucking legislate, right?
I think there's I think that the implication is that the idea that this is an issue that will be affected by the outcome of the election. When somebody says like, you know, a right to choose is on the ballot, that doesn't necessarily, in a lot of these cases, like 6-week bans where they're campaigning this right now, like, and it is on the ballot. Not most of them are not your total ban on abortion. Most of them are 6 weeks or something like that. That's pretty restrictive, that most women wouldn't be able to discover by that time anyway, but it's not a complete ban. But if that was to be implemented, I would say that, yeah, that it ended up being on the ballot. Like if we were to say, let me ask you this then. Let's say Trump got elected and then he was like, psych, federal abortion ban actually. I know this is not going to happen because he knows it's a political dead end. And I think he, unless it became politically beneficial for him, he wouldn't do it. I do think if it was politically beneficial, he might do it. But I think he understands the wins right now and most people are not in favor of it. But let's say he was, and then after the election, he implemented that. Post facto, could you say it was on the ballot?
If he didn't, I mean, you could say that it was a possibility. I just think that, again, like I'm going to think saying something on the ballot is a direct dichotomy that it's either going to happen or it's not going to happen. Like this person is 100% going to do it and this person is 100% not going to do it.
Man, I really
like. That's what it seems like. And that's what it seems like it implies to me, and it seems like that's what it implies to a lot of other people as well.
Like if JD Vance was, you know, running, if let's say JD Vance became the nominee against Kamala, and JD Vance said, I don't care about Ukraine, just like he did before. I don't care about Ukraine. I don't want to give them anything. We should like leave Ukraine. It's not our business, right? Which is his position. And Kamala said, I want to continue to support Ukraine. I want to continue to give them arms. If somebody said Ukraine's survival is on the ballot here, just because America stops sending aid does not mean Ukraine will necessarily completely die, right? Right. But the odds of that happen goes up exponentially. And so I don't think it would be too hyperbolic to say that their survival is on the ballot and to say that it is something that could heavily be impacted by the outcome of the election. Their odds of survival.
Right. I think like you said, you implied even it's going to be at least a little bit hyperbolic. And I think especially in the instance of like democracy outright ending, it's extremely hyperbolic. I think there's too many hurdles you're going to be jumping over there. And it seems that it's going to imply an almost precise certainty that something will happen or will not happen when you're directly comparing it to an issue actually being.
I mean, like Hungary is like I think a very, maybe not Hungary is the best example. I guess I could use Hungary. And Hungary, the democratization of the state is very worrying. The way the media trends and centralization of control of certain things, and I worry about it continuing to deteriorate in some way. Would you say that if they ended up electing somebody that, you know, ended up being authoritarian and became a dictator, let's say Viktor Orban became dictator of Hungary, or somebody became dictator of the United States tomorrow after they were voted in office, you would just say, and if this is the case, we just fundamentally disagree, that, you know, democracy was not on the ballot when they ran. It was not on the ballot. It was not an issue, even if it's been made a public issue by its opponents. And pointing,
like, you can say like hindsight's 2020 and just be like, yeah, well, turns out
so
it
then
wasn't
it
the
could
ballot,
be on the ballot then.
You have no idea, and especially there's all these hurdles to jump through. I think it's insane. Like you could say,
you're saying like, it could be on the ballot then.
Yeah, you could say that it could be on the ballot in hindsight, but I don't think saying that it is on the ballot like in the moment is particularly useful for anything other than like messaging to simple-minded people.
Honestly, for me, a lot of that conversation, and this is my own opinion, and I do think the message could have been probably communicated better by DeConnor to Lauren and AJW. But to me, a lot of this jostling felt like, from my perspective, and I don't say these during the debates, and I usually don't comment afterwards because I don't want to ruffle feathers, but, you know, I just like you, Cam, and I will be honest with you. I felt like some of it was, if you get into the discussion about, like, Trump's tendencies around democracy, and Trump's tendency around the constitutions when it comes to putting himself against institutions, which we want to live beyond ourselves. I want democracy to live beyond me. I assume you want our institutions and the things that have helped give us some security we can pass on to our children. And I fear that he's going to do damage to those things that is bad. It's going to be very negative and could, I think, lower the amount of like an effective democracy we have in the United States. Maybe not completely destroy it. That I think that it's harder to discuss that because I think the argument is so good. So it's easier to argue the dichotomy. And so maybe the question should have been worded a little bit more clear. But I do believe that in that discussion, that dichotomy was clutched to a lot because a lot of these facts were very uncomfortable about how Trump treats democracy.
No, I clutched to that because I just I didn't prepare at all, so I just had
I understand you. I
don't think you have anything to apologize for. I don't think that you have anything to apologize for in framing it that way. I think it made for an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's just how I'm going to view it. And like I said, I thought about it a lot. So yeah.
Okay. Well, is there anything?
Quick question for you.
Yeah, sure. Dope.
Unrelated. Do you leave your like playbacks live on your channel? Because I did not record any of this, and I'm totally gonna download it later.
So wait, how much of you are gonna repost? Are you just gonna find the best moments where you dunked on me the hardest and re-upload that? Or are you gonna re-upload the entire
with you, I was
3.5? Okay, that's fine. I'm not. Yeah, but I'll publish my VOD, and you can republish it somewhere.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Yeah. I didn't think that we'd go for 2 hours.
No, I didn't think we'd go. I mean, we didn't really come with a strong schedule. I thought we'd go about an hour, but yeah, we really talked.
Yeah, good conversation, man. So yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for talking. Did I make you reflect a little bit on any of your positions?
Yep, I am a social democrat now.
I reflected on my stuff too. Yeah.
You support Trump now?
Yeah, I'm also an incel. Yeah, I'm kidding. Yes, now I am full. Did you support Haley in the primary?
Dude, I've been so disconnected from like electoral politics. Like I said, I'm just getting my toes wet in it again because I worked at PragerU for so long that it was like 501c3 territory, and I just stayed away from it totally because it's electoral stuff. But now I'm getting back into it, so I wasn't super involved electorally the past 2 years at all. I've just been talking about Israel and various other things that crop up that are not directly related to electoral politics.
Nah, I think you're a closet Chris Christie fan. I think you were in love with Chris Christie. Yeah.
Love hamburgers, yeah. I'm very...
Okay, man. You have a good one. Thank you so much for coming on. And you have a good one, man, okay? I'll be safe. And you do too, okay?
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.
What a discussion. What a discussion. What a discussion. Oh boy, oh boy.